Welcome to the podcast, Eye for Talent, the show where we've got an eye for talent. I'm your host, Dylan, aka DJ Cereal Sauce. I'm a YouTube content creator, Twitch streamer, producer, almost voice actor, almost free. There's a lot of things that I'm like almost doing, but I haven't committed yet. This is not about me. Joining me is Spookyshine, aka Spooky, or Spook, or like Spookster, like Spunky. I've given him a bunch of weird ass names because I don't know how to converse with people on an appropriate level. He probably has a million other names that other people have called him that are relatively similar. He's also a Twitch streamer. He's an artist. He's a member of the Something Stupid community. Hopefully you're seeing a pattern here. But on top of that, he's just a big fan of life balance, online networking, mental health, and just generally trying a bunch of new things all the time. So good day, sir.
Good morning. Hi. Actually, another good one in there that you won't often hear people call me is Ebon. Because, well, you wouldn't know because I don't think you've ever really heard it, but you'll hear a lot of people call me Evan because that's my actual name. And long time ago when I started streaming, people used to call me Ebon, and I don't know where it came from. I think it came from my buddy Lucas, or Mrit as we know him as. So it just stuck for the longest time. So I've gotten used to it, man.
Fair enough.
There's a lot of names.
I mean, I have a lot of friends who they have their name and then they have their name that we call them by. So my friend Peter. I can't get this out of my head, but whenever I refer to him, I just refer to him as Peter, but in a pirate accent. So I'm just like, Peter. And that's just Peter. My friend Dakota, for some reason, whenever he joins a call, actually Peter will call him Deschmoder for some reason. My friend's younger brother's name is Craig, and we call him Krung.
Krung? Oh, the good names, man. Good names. You'll hear that with Nick too. I think we all have good names for our friends online. Nick, I've known at IRL for a long time, but you'll hear me call him my son all the time because there's a significant age gap between him and I. So we used to work together. I used to call him my son all the time. I used to call him Nicolas all the time. He loved
That's
it.
funny.
Or at least I think he does.
I definitely do not have an appropriate enough relationship with my coworkers for them to call me that, because the closest age gap between me and my next coworker is let me think. So it's a 2-year age gap. I'm 22 and this person's 24. Then it's I'm 22 and my other coworker's 27. And then the next highest is 30. And then the next highest is 42. And he has kids who are my age. And I'm like, if you call me my son, I'm filing an HR report.
Well, that's no different than us here. Because you don't know how old I am, do you?
No.
You weren't there for the birthday stream. Shame on you.
There's a lot of things that I'm not here for anymore, man. I'm trying not to be the absent son. And what? That doesn't make sense.
Listen, when you get into streaming and you do stuff like this too, right? It's not that you prioritize your time and where you can, right? So that's the most difficult thing, especially when it comes with the online stuff. You want to be everywhere, and that's no different than me. I want to be everywhere all the time. You just can't, right? But you show your love where you can, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm just razzing you anyways, but no, I turned 30 this year too. But I think most people, yeah, it's maybe the way between the way that I act, or I don't know, ADHD, who knows, whatever it is. I live very young. I only say you're only as old as you feel, and I've been 17 since I've turned 17. So it hasn't really changed much for me. So
yeah, that makes sense. If I had to guess, I would have assumed probably late 20s, but teetering towards the middle of 20, 27 or something. But speaking of ADHD, I was talking to a coworker who I don't even know how old he is. But he was talking to me about something, and then I made a joke about how there's a generational difference between me and him. If I had to guess, that was what I said in the conversation. I was from one generation to another, you probably have ADHD if you're anything like my generation. He's like, how old are you? And this was 6 months ago. And I was like, I'm 20. And he was like, what? I'm how old did you think I was? And then he didn't answer the question. And that was when I realized that I'm in a weird position at my job because I am the youngest person to work in the executive office.
Dude, that's office work though too. I had that opposite form of it, dude, because working in restaurants for so long, you get so many young kids that start in restaurants. It's just the way that it goes, right? Not maybe back of house as much, but same thing, except for the fact that it was I was the oldest one there. And it's when people they almost see you as well, you need to teach me. And it's listen, just because I'm older than you doesn't mean I know any more than you do about this job in some cases. So it's funny how that happens with it, but
yeah. And that's kind of what I think is also the funniest thing about being the young. So the funniest thing is that I'm the youngest person in the building, and I'm the youngest like account manager that we have. But I'm the person who's been an account manager for the longest, so I have to teach everybody everything.
How long have you been doing account management for?
I've only been doing it for a year, but I've been at that job for 2 years and 2 years and like 2 months almost. But the problem is that when I joined, we had a team of account managers of 4 people. 4 people, yeah, 3 regular account managers and then a senior account manager. One of them left shortly after I joined because I don't know why. And then probably I mean, she had left at some point within the first 6 months of me being there, and then I was there for a full year. And about a week before they promoted me to being a junior account manager, they were like, "Yeah, so the senior account manager got fired," and I didn't bother to ask why because I was like, "I don't care, not my business." And then after I became a junior account manager, then they hired a new person to take over for the fact that our first account manager had left. And about 3 or 4 months into him being the account man, or sorry, within the first month of him being there, or like right before he left, our other account manager left, leaving just this one guy to train me and a new guy. The new guy comes in, and within about 3 months of him being there, then our final last account manager leaves, and it's just me trying to teach him something new. And then,
God.
and then somebody who had been an account manager at a different company for 15 years joins, and I have to teach them everything as well. And then somebody who was working with them in like a similar field started probably a few months after they joined. They joined in like February.
See,
I'm like,
it's
like,
weird. You were like close to like my job with that. I was like, are you sure we don't work at the same place? Like that's what happened to me when I started. Ironically, I think I'm about the same spot with you there too, because I think I've been at my current place for the last 2. Yeah, it's been 2 years and a couple months now too. So I would have started in May, I think it was. So except for the differences now is that we lost one person and we haven't been able to hire anybody else since. But I didn't get trained. I just got thrown into the fire. But see, that's where we connect. We both just happen to live our boring 9-to-5 office jobs at this point.
Yeah. There's a bunch of interesting things that have happened as a result of that. But the only relevant thing that anybody else in here needs to know is that every TikTok that I post, Spooky always says something on them. And also the first few that he saw, he was like, "You work in an office building?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I see the windows." And I'm like, "What windows?" He's like, "These are the same windows as every other office building." I'm like, "All right."
Yeah. Listen, I'm a good observer, man. I know, like, I'm it's visuals for me. Visuals, I can pull out a lot of stuff just from looking at it. And that for me is like, that's why it's like when I saw it, I'm like, dude, that's like every brand new fancy office building that a company's like, "Oh, we got to buy the new stuff. It looks great. The inside's gorgeous." But I was like, those windows, those mirror style windows, they're iconic at this point. Like,
it's I think the building's only like 3 years old. I think it was made in 2020 and they moved in probably 2020. So good
sounds
for them.
about right.
Yeah,
After
shouts out.
COVID stuff. Yeah.
But this isn't about that. This isn't. Well, I guess tangentially it'll come up at some point because I have a question in here about work specifically. But
Nice.
I didn't make it obvious enough at the top of the episode. This is kind of just like as I've wrote down in my notes here, in quotes. Honestly, this will likely just be a fucking riff off. LOL.
Sounds right. That's okay. Listen, that's where the best moments sometimes come up, right?
So yeah, it's that's my favorite thing. I love like it's like, here's my prescribed thing of how I'm going to do things, and then in the middle I hear somebody say something, and I'm like, hold on, wait, I have another question for this that deviates from the path. It's just fun.
It works.
But
it works. It's conversation, right? It feels less like work. I like those kind of conversations, man. They're just so much nicer. I don't know.
Yeah, and those conversations also tend to like help people open up, because like a lot of people, they're like anxious to come on a podcast because of like the whole stereotype, which I've made jokes about a couple times already. But it's like, people come on here and it's like, I just want to have a good time, man. Like, I reached out to you because I think it would just be an entertaining podcast to be on. I get to learn some stuff. You get to learn some stuff. People get to learn some stuff. We just get to have some fun.
Yeah, well, it's like interviews. Actually, wait, that's a good word to start, because I could tell you about the time that I had something like that happen to me too, which was like years and years ago. Actually, it would have been Pride here in Toronto, and at the time that I was there was I to this day, actually, I've tried to find the video to see if I'm in it, because like I have a weird thing with, it's not necessarily being put on the spot, but it is at the same time in a short form to not go too far off from my storytelling with this. It was like the same time and the only time that I've ever been summoned to court. I have this thing about that type of position, being a potential juror and like standing in that room with the judge there and knowing the kind of power they have and stuff like that. It almost gave me like a nervous twitch. And I don't know why, because it was like, I have no reason to be nervous. There was like 300 other people that could get picked here, and I haven't even been picked yet. And I'm already like sitting here, like shaking in my boots, like trying to figure out what's going on. Right. But when we were at the Pride there at the time, or I could say an ex-girlfriend at the time that I was with, I got pulled aside because there was this guys just doing interviews. They were just doing random people off the street kind of thing. And it was being videotaped, right? And, you know, we went through, we had the conversation, we did the interview. I was like a little nervous about it. And then at the end, you know how people have like their call sign kind of thing. And he just wanted me to say specific words to it. And I just couldn't say it. Every time I would do it, I would screw it up. And he did like 4 takes. And then eventually he was just like, all right, we need to get a couple more people in here. We're going to say it all together. And I still screwed it up on the last take. And I was like, dude, why am I so nervous about this? It makes no sense. But no, I think like now it's like, I've been in front, like when you sit in front of a camera all day at this point and you know that people are watching you, that kind of thing. It's like, it's not really there for me anymore. It almost became like second nature, like to me now. Cause like I've been streaming for so long that I think when I first started, it was like a little nervous for people can see me all the time. I'm always worried, like, does my hair look good? Does this and that. Now it's just like, I'm wearing PJs right now. I don't have socks on. Like I'm just chill with it kind of thing. And it's just, you get used to that feeling, I guess, more or less. And it helps you kind of open up to things like this, right? It's like I talk with so many people all the time. You know how big the Discord is for the most part. I don't mind popping in and chatting with some new people, seeing what they're about, doing their kind of thing. I'm not always in there, but when I am, I try and at least, you know, promote that kind of networking, you know, make them feel comfortable, make them feel like they don't need to be nervous to be here. We're all people at the end of the day, right? So
exactly, we're all trying our best, and that makes sense. But yeah, I suppose too. The only question that I warned you before this, I was like, I have 5 questions so far because again, this is a riff, and one of them has nothing to do with the topic at hand. But you seem to kind of be the only person who has just openly admitted their like quote unquote obsession with just following this podcast week after week. So I'm kind of just you know like why, like what for, like like what for, and what made you think like yeah, I'll come on here. This sounds dope.
You know what? It's a good question. If you want my honest opinion about it too, is that like I said, coming actually quickly back to that, I'm an observer at heart. So for me, when I find little things that I like, and it could just be anything, it could literally be the most randomest thing. I think it was when I stumbled upon Bab's podcast was the first one that I kind of like when I started listening to. And there was something about it, like listening to you talk. Then your TikToks just started coming up on like my TikTok page, like For You page, like literally like every other one was like it was there, right? So it was like, you know, I'm not like superstitious, and I'm not really like I'm not a religious person. I always tell people I'm like spiritual more than I am anything, but like there's just signs in life that sometimes it's just like it comes up, and that was it for me, right? Like and when I started listening to it, like I said, I could. For me, like passionate people are the people that I like to chat with, because you know it's not only a good conversation, and I can hear the passion in your voice. You know, like you said, you do your research with things, the way that you chat with people, that kind of thing. Like I'm very sociable in that sense, and that kind of stuff fascinates me in its own way. Seeing passionate people, because I like to bring passionate people into my own life. I'm very passionate about a lot of the stuff that I do, right? So it just like good energy brings good energy, kind of thing, right? So that was part of the thing was I just kept seeing it. And then I actually started listening to the podcast. I'll be honest with you, I've been kind of slacking over the last little bit. But yeah, it was like, and then it kept coming up. And like, obviously now that I've been liking a lot of your TikToks and I've been like, you know, watching them all come along, I was like, well, now I got to show them support. Right. And that's another thing that comes with it, man. Like when you're passionate about something, those are like especially when you start doing things too, I like to support people for that, because definitely you want people to encourage them with that kind of thing. And that's been my thing. I like to kind of subconsciously encourage, and especially if I enjoy it, because I want to hear more about it. Right. So that would be my obsession. That's definitely where it is. So.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense. It is interesting now how like how many people have I asked? I think you are the second person who I've asked about this question, and both of them have also been like part of the answer to that question from you and the last person that I asked the question to was like you speak in a way that also just like shows that you are interested in the conversation, you're informed on what you're talking about, but you're also open enough to just kind of let people, like, you're open enough to let people talk and kind of to help people open up to talk about things that they, I guess, maybe not necessarily think that they're going to talk about, not because it's like barred knowledge or anything, but just because it's like, when it, when is the, what's a good example? When is the line on somebody's butt cheek ever going to become a relevant talking point in conversation? And then it just happens,
Exactly. That's where it is, man. It's the very much. I'm trying to think of like what the good term. There's always all these phrases. And I feel like I know them, and then I always just like my brain. I go brain dead. You know what I mean? But it's that literally. It's like the flying off the seat of your plane. It's just like go with the flow, let it happen, and see where it takes you. And it brings some good moments with it. And like I said, I'm such a people person. I like to know like, where those crazy stories coming in, or like what's something that can like pique someone's memory to bring up something that like is so out of pocket that it just falls onto a whole conversation. And it makes it even better because then it's like, if I got a story to relate to that, right, it's like, hell, I could ramble on for hours when it comes to that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Trust me, there's a reasons why I don't drink as much as I used to, and you can ask the wife about that kind of stuff too, because it's like once I start talking, man, I don't stop, especially if I've been drinking too. Like I become so lovey with people too. It's like, I love you, man, this and that. But it's like, no, it's that conversation that kind of comes up with it, that it's like, yeah, it interests me. I think it is that extrovert side of me, right? If I actually left the house and had the money to go to parties and do stuff, I would probably be doing it there. But instead, the internet especially has been more my place, and meeting people online has just felt more like my people, right? So
yeah, that makes sense. I don't go to parties. I think the last time that I went to a party was when I was probably 18 or 19, going to a party that I had absolutely no business going to because I knew a whole one or two people there. And one of the guys that I knew there, I only knew him because me and him worked at a Chinese restaurant together and then had gym together as senior year of high school, right? 12th grade. So I don't know why I did all of that, but it made me realize that, like, especially if I'm in like if I'm in an extroverted situation with people that I don't know, it's going to take a lot to try and get me to talk, just because I'm like, I recognize that I'm kind of more, I'm like over here.
you feel
And
out of place almost. Yeah.
yeah, a little bit, and not in a way where it's like I don't feel like I belong here, but it's just like I need to read the room and figure out like what can I talk about that can keep people interested. Because I'm like I like doing extroverted things, but a lot of the interests and things that I do are introverted in nature. So if I go to a party like that, I'm like, I know that these people aren't necessarily going to be on the same wavelength. And then I wait for one key phrase to happen, and then I just fly off the handle and just go
Oh
ham.
yeah, it just rocket ship. Yeah, I've had those processes too, where it's I can think of parties that I've gone to where it's just I felt out of place, tried to talk about people, the typical. It comes down to like you have to take your gamble on somebody, and then other times it's like, how's the weather, how's this sports team, it just sucks, right? But then other
Yeah.
times you hear somebody rambling on about like Magic the Gathering, and it's like I'm there like in seconds, like
Instantly.
ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Ugh.
sense. That's the other problem that I have. Like the clients that I work with, I have at absolute max two video calls a week, but because they changed the scheduling, but it used to be 3 like video calls a week with these different clients and whatever. And the only thing I can never seem to bring up with one of these in particular is the weather, because he lives in Arizona and I live in Utah. And so in like March or April, every time I'd call him, like this is what happened. So I called him one week and I'm like, hey man, how's it going? He's like, good. How about yourself? And I was like, good. It's hailing right now. And he's like, huh? I'm like, yeah, it's hailing right now. Not the greatest thing in the world, but we'll live through it. And he's like, all right, that's fair. Over here, it's like 70 degrees. It's starting to warm up and whatever, all this other stuff. Come next week, and I had the same thing. How's it going? Yeah, I'm doing good. How about yourself? Yeah, it's snowing. What? It's snowing? Yeah, it's snowing. All right, that's crazy. I mean, it's still getting warmer. We're soon going to be climbing into that point where everybody in Arizona has to stay inside, otherwise you just like die. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And then the following week after that, hey, how's it going? Not bad. How about you? It's hailing again. He's like, okay, are you serious? It's like 90 degrees here in Arizona. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
It's just the weather here. Yeah. Oh, that's like explaining Canadian weather to people too. I get that a lot as well. Well, irony, because I do have people from the office that I work in. It's mostly local, right? But we do get a lot of people who own, because like I moved from the city to basically, I wouldn't call it a backwater town, but it's it's pretty small compared to what I'm used to, right? But we get a lot of people who buy like things like cottages and like houses and stuff, and then they're out in the States for 6 months, and then they come here for 6 months in the summer, right? So I hear some of the stories about weather, and they're like, oh yeah, like we couldn't be here through like, like winter one week and then like 30 degrees the next week. And it's like, well, like you just kind of get used to it living here at this point, right? Like
Yeah, you just come prepared
literally.
for anything.
Well, when I was talking to you earlier today, context, we had a crazy thunderstorm that we knew was coming today. Dude, it was supposed to be like 3 hours long. And then by the time 4:30 hit, they were like, oh, like it's coming like now. And it literally was 20 seconds of like the hardest, like flash flood rain and thunder like crazy. And that literally gone by the time I got home. Like it's literally sunny again outside. And I was like, what is going on? Right? Like, yeah. No, last time we lost power last time. But thankfully it's only when the high winds that you have to worry about. And unfortunately, when you live in a small town, yeah, any kind of potential disaster related stuff is never fun to deal with, because when you live in the city, you never have to deal with any of that, right? Like if it happens, it's so rare, right? But
yeah, every person that I talk to is always like, you ain't never seen weather like this, and like I'm guilty of that too. It's like the weather is just a hideous beast in and of itself. It doesn't like it just happens.
As a good generic starter too, right? Because everybody who doesn't know weather, right? If you ask one of these days, let me tell you, if you ever ask someone how's the weather, they're like, what? What's a weather? It'll never happen, right? So
yeah, if I ask somebody how the weather is and they say what's the weather, they are too young and I shouldn't be talking to them,
yeah,
or
that's probably
or they're
accurate.
so not interesting that I don't want to talk to them.
Yeah. No, that's.
But
I've seen those office workers. Yeah. No, I'm good. I like a little bit more crazy than that. All right. If the most exciting thing in your life is pepper on your food, then yeah, I need a little bit more than that.
yeah, hold on. So that's how I think about things. And like, funnily enough, I've gotten like almost everybody in my office to say howdy now, because that's how I greet people when I first started. I just used howdy because it's like it's the most kind of representative of who I am. Like I'm not a big good morning person because I'm not polite enough for that. So I'll just be like howdy. I try my best, but like that. So like that's how I am. But then on the other hand, so when I was in high school, like the most interesting thing that happened to me in a given day is my parents had gotten burgers from some place, and the burger that I had, the tomato that was on it was the butt of a tomato, and I went to school the next day, and I was like, there wasn't really anything going on, but I was like, that was kind of silly. I've never seen that before, and so I turn over to the lady next to me before class starts, and I'm like, hey, I had a burger last night, and the tomato that was on there was the butt of the tomato. And she just deadpan stares at me and goes, your life's really not that interesting, isn't it? I was like, I give up. I hate it here. I'm leaving. This sucks.
It does be like that sometimes, though, right? Like sometimes good curveballs come around, sometimes bad curveballs. But a little bit of normality goes a long way, I think, in some cases.
Yeah.
It's a balance. Balance is huge for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. We probably should actually get into the like meat of what's going on here. There was a segue I was going to do earlier, and then like something else more interesting came up, and I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that.
I have a feeling we're going to happen that a few times here.
Yeah. We'll and that's, I don't think people care a whole lot about like the specific questions per se, so long as they get an answer that coincides with whatever I put in the title.
Fair. You didn't even tell me what the title was going to be, so I guess like we'll just figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, that's usually. I mean, it's as simple as take the person's name in a way that is short enough that people know who I'm talking about, but not so short that it's generic, and then talking, and then whatever the talking point was: art, content creation, music making, band, mental health. It's probably just going to be mental health, because what else am I going to say?
No, fair.
Mental health and working in an office space.
Yeah, really. God, that's. Yeah, we are white bread, aren't we?
Spotify's like, that's too long of a title. I'm like, all right, Jesus, I'm sorry. But no. I recognize that some of the questions that I have on here sound stupid as hell, because even though I know what I'm trying to ask, I recognize that on the surface it sounds like a dumb question. What was your like first exposure to like mental health being like a heavily talked about subject?
Oh, like in my own life, or just in a general sense kind of thing?
I mean, well, just like your first exposure to it being your first exposure to it being a way that is more like a more tangible, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, like I guess when it kind of became more important, I guess in my my own set. It's
Either like
no.
I guess either when it became important to you or when you were able to recognize that it became very important to somebody else. And there's a story that I can explain later in a question after that that can hopefully give more
Yeah.
context if it's confusing later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's funny, kind of that comes down to that because like I could kind of give like a brief pass to when it became more relevant to me and when I started to struggle with a lot of things. So with a very kind of light background with it, during my time of, well, I guess actually some good basics about me that you probably don't know, stuff that I don't often talk about, and it's not because I don't choose to talk about. It's just not a casual conversation always that it just brings it up, right?
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things that I always laugh about it because it's funny how different things in your life affect you in different ways, right? So one of the biggest things that is a great example, especially for me too, is like your parents getting separated, right?
Oh
You know,
yeah.
for most kids, things like that, like it's traumatizing in its own way, right? It's a struggle for a lot of kids to deal with. My parents separated. I'll be 100% honest with you. It was actually the weirdest experience for me because it did not come as a surprise. And when the way that I chatted was, and nothing against my parents, and they're very happily parted ways. My dad's remarried. My mom is doing her own thing. It's that's a little different, but I know, like, even when like that happened, like it didn't come as a shocker to me, and I would have been almost going to high school at that time, and I think like mentally, maybe it's just something that never clicked to me as something that was like going to be important for, you know, things later on or how it affected like my mood in certain ways or anything like that. But the first time that really did it, I did a lot of partying through high school, and during the time that I guess you could say that my parents had split. I didn't really have I would like to say, I didn't at the time have the greatest relationship with my dad. It wasn't that we were on bad terms, it's that my dad and I just never talked as much as I you know, maybe would have expected when it came to that. And ironically enough, it's going to be a weird set of series of events that's going to remind it. But I did a lot of partying through that time, through like especially like high school and stuff like that. My brother and I, like, you know, we smoked a lot of weed during that time. We drank a lot, right? It was a lot of party aspects. It was people I was hanging out with, and I'm an avid bowler. I do 5-pin bowling. I know like Americans usually 10-pin bowling for a lot of people. 5-pin's very Canadian version of it.
Huh.
In a very interesting way to kind of bring it out, I did a tournament off of a whim. I've been bowling for like 10 years or so, and our team did so well that we ended up being in the top 250 kids of Canada. And our team
Damn.
got like 6th or something like that for it. It was a great experience, I'll be honest with you. I went to the most boring place in Canada, which was Saskatchewan. But to relate to it with my story, on our trip back, I got back on my birthday. I'd spent 11 hours on a flight on my birthday back from, for some reason, it went from like Saskatchewan to BC back to Toronto instead of just going from Saskatchewan to Toronto, which I don't know if you know your provinces super well, but that's ass backwards to go in and out. And actually, I think we dropped in New York City at some point too for a layover. It was weird.
What in the fuck?
But when I got back, well, one of the first things was, all right, well, fuck it, I'm gonna have a drink, we're gonna smoke and everything else. And it was just like, I guess part of it was everything kind of coming together with it at the time, maybe jet lag and everything else. But like I just had a little too much and that kind of thing. And it was when it finally kind of dawned on me when I started to have like anxiety, or at least my first real experience with anxiety for once. And it was, well, you know, anybody who has it for the first time, it kind of came as in its own panic. It was something that I didn't really think much of at first, but after it kind of progressed and it made me actually think about it. I think it's like anything in life too, though, where you don't think about it until it actually becomes relevant in your own life. And I didn't really think about my mental health in that kind of way for the longest time, mostly because I was just partying. I was, you know, in high school. I didn't really care about it, right? But you know, fast forward a few years. Ironically enough, I actually ended up moving back in with my dad, and we started developing a bigger relationship again, which was really great during the time. But I noticed certain things that I used to do I could no longer handle. I stopped smoking because the anxiety started to actually start to ramp up and progressively kind of get worse. But during this time, I also struggled with insomnia for a very long time, had a really hard time sleeping. I stopped partying as much because I guess it was just kind of like, there's only a point where you can hit where you start to, the hill starts to plateau and then you start going down. And I think that's where that period kind of started, right? But it made me realize during that time that it was happening and a lot of the struggles that I was going through, that it was something that I didn't always think about. Now, of course, if, for the viewers, for you can't see, you guys know I'm also a smoker, in the sense of that I've been smoking cigarettes for a long time, which I don't recommend. Don't do it. Don't develop a habit. It's not worth it. Um, but during this time that like that kind of all stopped, I tried to quit smoking cigarettes too, and my mental health went down the drain. Panic attacks. It was bad. It was just a series of everything, right? And it wasn't until, and this was like during college. Thankfully, I graduated. It did kind of suffer to a lot of my work at the time. I was in a bad relationship at the time, so a lot of those things kind of all put together. So it wasn't until, ironically, I met Patty, which you've seen, that I started to really take that stuff more seriously and see it in a different light, right? And work to improve myself. And we talked about it a little bit before we started today too, where I was always the kind of person that there was that ego, or or at least what I assume was my ego, that I've kind of figured out my own way, that I didn't want to ask for help, that it made me feel too vulnerable. And I grew up in like a very, what felt like traditional home where, a man's a man kind of thing, right? You're tough, you don't cry, all this other bullshit that we know that's just kind of goofy to think about now in 2023 kind of style, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, it just open up, right? But it's yeah, it was where things, like, I started to pay attention to it more and realize that like the path that I was going down into my life and how it was really affecting my mental health in that kind of way, it really struggled with me. And I was a very giving person, and I think what part of happened with that too was that I got taken advantage of so much that that's also what really brought it down. So I did things. I started to kind of take steps to better improve myself and my own mental health, because at the end of the day, what I had realized is the people that I surrounded myself with were not people that, were naturally beneficial to me in that kind of way, right? I didn't have that support that I was looking for. It felt like I could open up to people. So I did internalize a lot of that stuff. But I think I was lucky in my own sense. It probably would have been great to see maybe like a therapist, or, look at maybe taking medications for the stuff that I did. But with the way that I learn things, I find that it's best for me to kind of try and figure it out on my own before I ultimately make those decisions too. And it helped with that process to it. And reflecting on it probably now compared to back then, I was like, oh, I feel like a big man for like improving my life and all this other shit, right? It's like I should have just asked for help at some point, right? But
Yeah, or at
no,
least
but like,
learn to employ both strategies.
yeah, right. Try and open up and reach out, and especially to the people that were close in my life, to really kind of have that. What's the word that I'm really thinking of with it is not necessarily clarity, but really understanding and accepting the fact that vulnerabilities don't make you small, right? It's actually makes you stronger in that sense. But yeah, it's, I would say that was probably around the time that it really recognized it. And ever since then, I've kind of been on that journey, especially with people I've met over the years, even in my own struggles and that kind of thing too, to really uh, learn from it, right? And also figure out what helped improve me and how I could help improve other people's lives, or at least to the best of my ability of what I could tell them, or hopefully, maybe teach them, right? So it was always been a big thing. And like the one thing that I could say out of that, that I'd like to say to people more than anything is that you always got to have your ups and downs, and I think that's part of life, no matter where we choose to go with it. But it's how you handles those ups and downs that really make the difference for yourself, right? Like again, like I mentioned a few times, because I like to repeat words, but balance is huge when it comes to that kind of thing, right? Nobody's life's perfect, nobody's always happy, but it's how you handle those things and do the things to make yourself happy again, or handle those bad situations, let's say, and turn them into better ones. So a little bit
Yeah.
longer than I expected, but
Well, I mean, it's a story. Stories are kind of, well, I guess they're not really meant to take a long time, but that's
yeah,
kind of the nature of them. It happens. In regards to the specific thing of you being like a, you know, what I'll call traditional masculinity being forced upon us, like I got to do all this shit myself. I had this really weird experience probably like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. So like a lot of my philosophy on like things in general is I want to like how do I explain this? People don't like working customer service because it sucks,
Okay.
right? And so
Yeah, we know that. We know well aware that it sucks.
yeah, customer service is not great. I'm lucky that I work at a job where I still have to deal with people in a customer service aspect, but they're paid to not be dickheads to me, right?
Mhm.
And I've only had one client who ever broke that rule by telling me that I specifically ruined his Adidas deal, and I'm like, I didn't do shit, buddy. That's not the point. No one likes working customer service because customers are mean, and I recognize that a lot of the way that customer service workers are treated is kind of like a generational difference, as well as just an experience difference of like who's worked in customer service before.
Oh,
So like
exactly.
there's a grocery store right next to my house. It's called Smith's. It's owned by Kroger brand. I don't know how popular that is around the world. I know it's like an American brand, but I don't know how much farther it
Yeah.
expands from there.
Mm.
But there's a store right next to my house, and when I was a little bit younger, aka right when the pandemic started, I was working in their e-commerce thing, just like picking up online orders that people placed and going and taking them out to their car when they come at their designated pickup time. So I understood the process of that whole thing. And there was a guy that I worked with when I was doing that. And he's only important because when I stopped working there, I still have to go pick up groceries for my parents and whatnot. That same guy is still there. And I'm pretty sure he recognizes me. And there is a very, very clear culture difference between me when I go to pick up and my mom when she goes to pick up, because she kind of likes to throw a fit about certain things. And I don't want to harass her here because she's a nice woman, but it's just like,
Mm.
that's kind
Let's
of
be
just how
real.
she is
She
sometimes.
gets things done. That's
Yeah,
probably what you're thinking.
that's probably what I would say. Yeah. But like she used to be like a waitress as well. So I thought that she'd be able to like handle the fact that like some things happen sometimes and whatever. And she kind of has this whole thing about like, people uh, like, can't this worker just like try and be a little bit more customer forward facing? And I'm like, he doesn't get paid enough to do that. It's not
Mhm.
his fault. I'm sure he's trying
That's
his best, but he doesn't, it's whatever.
that's
But
too accurate.
yeah, but because I used to work in that position, now when I go to pick up groceries, I'm like, hey, put it in the back seat, and then I get out of my car and I go start helping them put shit in my car, because I'm like, I want to get out of your hair as fast as possible so you don't have to deal with me. Even if I'm a pleasant person to work with, I just want to get out of your hair so you can spend more time not dealing with me.
Mm,
And I always thought that
I
that was specific to me because of my lived experience.
I think there's a lot of us that are in that have worked in that industry that do that. Like a good example. Like I don't know the last time you've been to a mall and you've done like clothes shopping or anything. I don't go out there often. I usually order everything online.
Yeah.
But when I was really young, I worked at Sears. That's what I used to do at other places. I folded clothes, man. I ran one of my stations when I first started there. That's what I did. To this day, that experience. I wasn't even there that long in that department. I think I worked there for like a Christmas break kind of
Christmas
thing, like three
season.
months, right?
Yeah.
I still to this day, if I actually go out clothes shopping, I will like if I pull up something to check it out, I will refold it and put it back, because I just think in my mind, if that would have been me that worked there and saw that one lady who literally just trashed an entire section that I have to come back and fold, like I don't want to be that person, because I know that work that comes into it, and those people work too hard for how little they get paid for, you
Yeah.
know?
And that's kind of and like, I used to be a waiter as well, working at the Chinese restaurant I mentioned earlier. And so that's why I'm like, I go to a restaurant and I'm like, I'm gonna try and stack my plates and try and leave some mess out of the way, so it's a little less thing that they have to do, insofar as their workflow actually like allows for that kind of thing. Whatever.
Yeah.
But I always thought that that was something that was specific to my lived experience, and to a certain degree, I'm sure it probably is. And then I saw this interesting TikTok, which, for the record, don't use TikTok as a means of trying to psychoanalyze yourself all the time, because a lot of people on TikTok think that everything is a sign of trauma, and I don't think that's true.
No.
But there was a thing I saw on TikTok that said that like a lot of men are kind of grow up with this idea that um you had like, in order to be valuable to your house, you have to provide a lot of things. And unless you are going to be the person who is directly doing something and fixing something, you should try and be involved with things as little as possible to basically uh, get in the way of people as little as possible, to not be a pain in their ass,
Mm.
which seems
I
oxymoronic in nature. But I saw that and I
it
was
made
like,
you
what?
think.
Yeah, I like it,
uh,
it didn't do like a ton of philosophy change in my mind, but I was like, how many people go through this? Like, how many people have
yeah.
this kind of thing that happens to them? And like, but it's not just because they've worked in a service industry. So they're just trying to be a little bit more courteous for people who are actively, to quote unquote, serving you. Like,
Oh,
it was a very weird thing.
I like good perspective. Like I see it as a decent thing too. I do
Yeah.
the same. Working in kitchens for so long, I know people who've been servers, dude. Like I do that too. I clean off all the garbage onto one plate. I do all the other stuff because I know that position that it would put some people in. You know, like there's people. I did dishwashing for a while. I know that there's people out there that smear honey all over their plates, and cleaning that shit off, man, is a royal pain in the ass. So it's like I'll scrape it up, put it in an easy, clean container. You know, you throw all your napkins together. Like maybe it's that courtesy thing, but yeah, first of all, you never take that advice from TikTok stuff. I swear TikTok can be so toxic with that kind of stuff. And then like there are some things on there that do bring up good points. Like I think there is good information there, but often like a lot of social media, there is so much like not necessarily misunderstanding, but like people who think that because their scenario worked that everybody it should work the same way for everybody, or like they tell you things that like this is what you should do for your life. It's no different than like the people who are like you need to stop eating cereal because it's got this and this, and it's like yeah, like then I can't eat this and this as well. It's like everything in excess, right? But you
Yeah.
just don't believe. Actually, ironically enough, growing up in the era where the internet started to get big, one of the first things that I think I've still kept to this day is don't believe everything you see on the internet, which is so true in so many
Yeah.
ways. Like unbelievably,
Yeah. I
but
think
no,
it's like,
like even
learning certain things and
yeah,
figuring out how
like
it
you
applies
said
to you.
too, like to the whole masculinity thing too, right? Like I think it actually even pulling it back further, it's a generation thing. You know,
Oh,
if you
yeah.
look at our like I an example, I don't know how old your parents are. Like you know, my dad's turning 60 this year, which is like still boggles my fucking mind at this point. But you know, my mom's 64 now. I think I always forget my mom's birthday, 64 or 65. Oh God, she's retiring. But it's very much like they're older parents. Like a lot of the people that I grew up with in my generation, like their parents were like in their early 20s when by the time that like I started to like realize more and more in my life when I was coming to age, you know, 10, 11, 12, like up into my teenage years, I realized that obviously my parents had me a little bit later, right? Which within your 30s is actually reasonable. It's just at the time it seemed like more people were having it at a younger age, right? But it was my mom, right? You know, like my mom was so traditional old school, and like my background's Italian, my dad's the Italian one, so like there's a lot of traditional values that come with that. So it's no different than I think like European kind of style of thing. Like I don't know if you've talked to a fair amount of people with that kind of stuff where it's like mental health to them, it's like it's non-existent. If you're a man, you just suck it up and take it, you know, this and that. But it's like no, that's not how the world works. That's why
Yeah.
there's so many people with issues out there, right? It's like don't believe in that kind of stuff, right? But it took me a while to break that mentality too, right? Because it was like trying to understand in myself that like you know it's I don't like to say I'm traditional. I keep a lot of traditional values that I think I personally value, but there's a lot of stuff that, and I think being an artist and also being creative in my own kind of sense and staying open to ideas, it's overall over time shaped the way that I process those kind of things. And it's not that I pull the exact you know lesson that these old school things like pull, but I take it in my own way, again with a grain of salt, for me to kind of understand it in a way for me that works, right? So
Yeah.
but yeah.
And I think that yeah, that's a big thing of it is like a lot of people who will come on the internet and will just tell you this is like tell you something as if it is a hard fact. I don't take a lot of that very well. I'm just like no, I'm
Mhm.
like yeah, sure, whatever. Like if I know within my heart of hearts that that is the case, like that's a whole different thing. But people who just come on and they're just like immediately this is a fact. I don't take that information very well, but I do
Yeah.
really appreciate things that analyze the same sort of subjects, but like analyzing them and kind of talking about them in a not really speculative way, but in a way that's like um there's one guy that I follow that talks a lot about masculinity things, but he talks about it in a way that's like these are things that we can observably see are true based off of what happens based on what has happened in the past and based on things that you see in current day, um and then like analyzes those things and then kind of tries to help people sort of break out of general toxic mindsets, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think that's what it is. It's the toxic side of it, right?
Well,
I
yeah.
think like if you take the traditional values that you can benefit you. Let's put it that way, and not necessarily just benefit you, but in a more societal sense of benefiting everybody as a whole, right?
Yeah.
That just comes down to being a decent person, right? But
Never
no,
heard of
I
it.
think like I feel like femininity, like in men, just don't like it. Just for some reason seems to still be it's not that I want to say that it's not right. It's just like it feels like people are afraid to be feminine in
It
their
feels
own way,
uncomfortable for
right?
them. Yeah.
Yeah, like good example actually to pull with this. I have a pink shirt that I wear that it's one of the only shirts that actually I've bought recently that I'm incredibly proud of, because I had a guy that I found who streams, and he does a lot of charity work, and he did it for like the what was it, the one of the breast cancer like movements that he was doing. It was not necessarily nonprofit, but anyways, it was a pink shirt. It's got his logo on it and everything.
Yeah.
And for every time that somebody bought one of these shirts, he would match it, and all the money that went to the shirts and the money that he matched all went to his charity. It was
Yeah.
phenomenal. So I got it a couple months later. I wore it the other day, and to realize how backwater sometimes my town was, I just went for a walk because I needed to get out of the office. I was like, it's a gorgeous day. I'm gonna enjoy the breeze, man. I'm really close to the lake, so it's like it's gorgeous every time. And I walk past these group of, let's say it's an older generation, because it was, and they're like, oh, good on you for wearing pink and all this and that. And I'm like, dude, it dawned on me, and I talked to Patty when I got home about it, because I was like, it's been years since I've actually had to think like wearing pink is like a thing, right? That like it's like, people are like, oh, like cheering me on for it. I'm like, you shouldn't be cheering me on for this, man. I should be able to wear pink and just feel normal about it, right? Like I don't know anything for wearing that, man. Like it's just a shirt that I enjoy.
Yeah.
I don't see it objectively. I just see it as like, this is what I was wearing today, right? Like it just
Exactly.
it dawned on me. I haven't thought about that in years, man. It was weird. So, but it's like I don't know what it is, where it's just like, yeah, that's what it comes down to, is that people like are afraid to open up and like embrace that. You know what? We all have a certain level of femininity in our own lives, right? And I don't think that the toxic sides, like talking about your feelings and things like that, are things that people should stray away from. It's things that they should embrace as a person, and confide in who you confide with, right? Like it'll help you in so many ways, right? So
Yeah, no, exactly. That's kind of like that's one of those things where it's like if doing something that like people making a big deal out of something that really shouldn't be a big deal. Like that's kind of like the perfect example of it, because for as long as I like started buying my own clothes, which was from the ages of like 16, I think, probably no, that's way too late. Sorry, let me try again. Well, no, I guess it would have had to have been around then, maybe 14 or 15, because at that point I was actually getting paid to do things. Whatever. I have never had an issue with like wearing things that are pink in general, because I think it's a nice color.
yeah.
The only thing that stops me from wearing certain pink shirts is that I don't like that shade. I'm like, that doesn't look very good.
That's understandable, actually, right?
Yeah.
Like I guess if you gotta have, sometimes you want to look good, man. You got to think about that fashion sense, right? Like,
Yeah, it's not a masculine thing. I'm just like, this pink does not look good with the color of the pants that I have, and like I even had like a harder time matching up colors sometimes, because my hair's been a handful of different colors between the ages of like let's say 17 and now. And so I have to like worry about color matching that way. And so it's like I do have a couple of family members who are, I mean, when this was happening, they're probably late 40s, and they like, my mom would make comments about it sometimes. She'd be like, oh, you're wearing a pink shirt. I'd be like, yeah, it's a nice looking shirt. That's
yeah,
it.
just counter it, man. That's what it is. Yeah.
So that's kind of where I think it's interesting, is because I uh defining generational gaps is very weird, because I feel like after millennials, it started to get really muddied as to what actually is classified as being within a certain generation. And I think you can be like 38 or like something to still be considered a millennial. So
Yeah.
all that's to be
It's
said is I don't think we exist in the same generational gap, but I think as a result of that, that's where a lot of these differences are coming from. And I think now people are becoming more open to the concept of talking about these kinds of things, because of the fact that it's now starting to kind of like a lot of those sort of old fashioned values on being like a good person, I guess, have kind of waned out. And so people are starting to come to grips with like what it means to be masculine in a healthy way, feminine in a healthy
yeah.
way, not being
Well, I think
toxic and things.
well, those like see, here is where it gets interesting with me when it comes to this kind of stuff too, because I always say with that label of like what generation are you in too is a way to just like group people and then determine, oh, like, like if someone's like, oh, you're a millennial, oh great, then you're going to complain about this and that and this, and it's like people using it in that negative sense. I feel like it's so weird to see it in that way, right? Because I guess like that's the thing that I'm always at, because I'm at that weird point where I'm like a millennial, but I'm also not, and they were calling them like zillennials or something like that for a bit. They like internet dubbed it, but like I don't see it like that again too, right? But I like, with the older generations, I can see it because there was a certain way of life and like the way that things changed weren't as drastic as I feel they were in the last like 20, 30 years. Because if you see of how much of a difference like the internet has done for us, technology, everything, right? I feel like even, Gen Z and like, what are they calling the newest generation now too?
That's a good question. I don't know.
You see, that's when you start getting older, man. When you start not picking up all that.
Well, no, I'm 22. The reason I don't know it is because the generation start. Well, to be fair, the generation did start like 10 years ago, but it's because nobody's been able to no one's been able to appropriately define the lines for my generation. So I don't expect them to be able to even give a name to the next one.
Yeah, but like we'll see with it, right? But no, like I think if we do it in the process of like how history, like if we don't learn about history, history will repeat itself kind of thing, right? But I think as humans and as people in society, we adapt to our nature and the way things that change. And obviously the people that don't change with it tend to keep it's no different than evolution in its own sense, right? Like, and I'm not being scientific necessarily about it, I'm just using it as an example, right? But we keep on to those traits that bring value and positivity, and they manifest, right? And then we get rid of the old because, you know what, maybe they just no longer apply, or they're just not part of our lives kind of thing, right? And that's where I think, especially even like with mental health, like what we were talking about, I think that's why now people have opened up so much about it, because, instead of struggling and like, just starving themselves through this whole process, they're actually, doing something about it. And that's where it was like, especially like millennials, where that's where that generation thing came in, is like, oh, you just whine about everything. And not, it's like, no, it's because we finally had the balls to come up and be like, listen, I don't want to struggle. Somebody help me with this. And that's where we are now, right? Where it's like we changed with it. And I think it's breaking things, like even an example, and I won't go too far into the topic, but like breaking gender norms, an example, right? Like it's one of those things where it's, I don't think we live in that conventional society that people, put themselves in their little bubbles and think that we live in. I think it's, us opening up and breaking those social standards that maybe we had previously is what ultimately will help us evolve to be better people, right? So
yeah,
it's good, get people out of those struggles somehow, right? So
yeah, exactly. And I think like with where we're at right now, I think it's also people at least being open to the idea that like because evolution being a relatively natural process means that you don't have to do a ton of weeding through to find really bad things. But the benefit that we have is that like we can spot that when it's happening and try and make efforts to sort of quote unquote artificially help to get rid of some of those really bad habits and traits.
Yeah, well, and it comes, I think, really heavily on a social side too, right? But if you look at social media too, right? I think there are pros and cons to this too, right? Because I think that genuine people who need help and ask for help sometimes get pushed off to the side for people who maybe use that for their advantage, and they may not actually be struggling with something, right? So I think like there's always going to be kind of two ends to the story with it too, right?
Yeah, but just because something bad is manifesting out of it doesn't mean it shouldn't exist.
Yeah, I guess, well, yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong with that. So
I've had long ass conversations with people concerning things that are completely on the other end of the spectrum of this, that I'm not even going to get into. But like my friend is like, we shouldn't put this law in place because then it's not going to do anything because people are going to break it. And I'm like, so laws are not meant to be broken, but a law is going to get broken. So does that not mean that it should exist? Like, you sound silly.
Well, laws are meant to be changed, right?
Yeah.
So, but I've been there. I feel like there's open talks about this, and then there's political arguments about it. You know what I mean? Like there's very rare to find an in between conversation with that kind of thing. So
yeah, because unfortunately the everything likes to make everything political to some degree to try and pit somebody against other. It's not a great situation to be in, but we're trying our best.
Yeah. Listen, we'll make it there eventually.
Yeah, we'll
Right?
make it there eventually. That's
Yeah.
my go-to thing. Whenever things get hard, I'm like, we're trying our best.
Yeah, you know what? Like, at least we can give ourselves the effort for it, right? You know, the worst thing you can do is try. If you fail, just try again, right? Just never stop trying. That's a good way to put
Yeah,
it as, right? Because at
yeah,
least you put effort into it more than anything. So,
yeah. I think
eh,
this is stupid. I play some Overwatch. Zenyatta, he just goes like, failure. Or wait, home. What does he say? Failure is acceptable. Giving up is not. Basically.
yeah, no, it's a good ways to live by, man.
So yeah.
It's good words, man. My boys in Yada. Shout out Overwatch for that.
Yeah, they've done a lot of interesting things in the past. This isn't about them.
Experience transcendence, man.
No. So this is the other kind of question that I was like, I'm going to clarify this, and now I'm realizing this is worded kind of weirdly given your initial story about your kind of introduction into mental health and coming to terms with how it's actually affecting you and how you need to use it to help make yourself a better person. It's just like, so I have it listed as what was so quote unquote interesting about mental health to the point where it became a regular part of conversation rather than just an acknowledgement of its impacts or even a conscious decision to uphold a positive mental space. In your case, it's not really an interesting thing. It was more like a necessary thing that you
Yeah. Well,
again came to conscious and figured it out.
I think both. I think both. Because I do separate my personal experiences from what I advocate for. Right.
Yeah.
It's actually probably helped me understand it in a way for me to communicate it to other people too. One of the and I like actually one of the reasons why I think I network so well is because I like meeting people from all salts of the earth. Right. Like it's interesting to bring so many different mentalities and so many different people, and I think ultimately that's shaped kind of not necessarily like my go-to's, but how I can read a certain person based off of maybe what they tell me, or what their experience they've gone through with it. But I became passionate about it because I feel like even especially on an online kind of thing, I feel like people promote the negative side of it more than you see people advocating the positive side to it and the things to help people take those baby steps even to a better life, right? And then, like, I'm not like Goop or anything like that, like I'm not being out here like, oh, you got to drink like 8 cups of water a day and try out my supplements. Like, no, I'm not like that kind of advocate. I'm just more of the sense of like I think part of it comes for me is, and I wouldn't necessarily see it as a negative trait, but it has kind of been a negative trait in my own way too. But like I like helping people in many different ways, right? Even if it's like little things, even if it's unintentional or if it is intentional. And I think that growing need for me to want to, I think it's also please people in that sense, and that's where maybe that more negative side kind of comes in, is why I became more such an advocate to it, because I'm passionate about it because of my own experiences and what I've chatted with other people and what they've gone through and my experiences of helping them through that kind of stuff. And it's why for me to I don't know. I'm trying to think of the ways that I kind of want to word that, but like at the end of the day, I think that's really just the answer to it, just to keep it simple, right? Like it's just something like I want to help people, and if there's something that I can do to do it, then I go for it, right?
Yeah.
If whether if it's reaching out or in my sense, right, being as a streamer, maybe giving somebody that opportunity for that one day to just say hi to them, right? Maybe they've reached out to hundreds of streamers, nobody's had the opportunity to really get to know them or anything else like that, right? And it's given me that opportunity, so I'm going to take it, right? And maybe that conversation is what will change them one day, right? And knowing that could be the potential there for something positive in my own life, feeling like I've been able to help them out, even if it's something small, it makes the difference to me. It brings me self-satisfaction with that, and I think that's where that passion comes from with it, right? And yeah, I'm trying to think of why really that kind of mentality, where that came into my own life. But I don't know, maybe something that happened throughout me through school, or at some points in my life that I wanted to help people, and it just forever kind of grew into that. But I've never really psychoanalyzed myself enough in that side of it to think why I actually do that. I think it's just second nature to me at this
Yeah.
point, right? But
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
in your case, it seems like it's just a thing of, it's just like, it's a thing that you are passionate about because of you were able to use it to help yourself, and you understand that it's a healthy thing for people to be partaking in. And especially depending on, like, there's not really a way to tangibly graph this out, but if you were able to, depending on how much of your life that portion of it, like of understanding your own mental fortitude and your own mental this, that, and the other thing, how much that affected you probably influences how much you want to essentially give back to enable somebody else to be able to take the first step to fixing, or at least acknowledging what's wrong.
Yeah. Well, nobody likes to see people suffer, right?
Well, yeah.
And yeah, like, well, that's the thing, right? And
Yeah.
especially if like suffering in silence, I think has always been the biggest thing that you always hate to see, right? And the best thing you can do is reach out to someone and let them know you're there. And if they ever want to take that opportunity to not, maybe open up or whatever they need to do in order for them to get started, like I think that's as a character trait is something for that I keep close to heart, especially for the people that I know, right? And I leave that actually that option open for a lot of people that I meet because I tend to come into every relationship with every person that I meet with a certain level of respect that I kind of uphold to, right? And ultimately, for me, people do things, right? They think, oh, maybe I'm a bad person because I did this or that, and like that kind of stuff, like doesn't really matter to me as long as it's within my own moral range of things. Just to clarify that, but it's more of like I I show that unintentional care as an opportunity for me to remain open with that because I think definitely for some people's lives they won't have even their closest family members or even their closest friends that they feel like that they can do that to, right? So maybe a stranger even just throwing that notion out there to them might give them that opportunity to finally do that to even something that's close to them, right? That makes a
Yeah.
big difference in someone's life, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, no, that makes sense. And it's like another way that I was thinking about it is it's almost like I guess the anonymity of the internet also means that like they don't necessarily, or so there's the anonymity of the internet, which is to say like I don't necessarily need to know this person face to face to be able to voice my frustrations or whatever's going on to this person if they're offering it to me like a good person. But
Mhm.
secondarily, it's like, especially if you don't know this person very well and they're kind enough to reach out to you to let you know that you are willing to help them, they haven't known you for that long and they maybe don't have to necessarily worry about breaking off a decade long relationship they have with this person over something. And I don't know how many
Yeah.
people are going through a situation where they're like trying to talk to their friend and they're like, yeah, I'm going through a hard time, and their friend's like, you know what, fuck you, blocked, never talk to them again. But
God, I've
you
had
know,
that.
the principle.
Yeah, yeah, it's rough for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But no, like, yeah, I think it makes a difference, and like, I like to be a positive person, as you've probably like seen, especially like on my streamer side of things and that kind of thing. Like, I always keep things as positive as I can because like that kind of thing, like talking about like we've discussed, obviously, is that talking about mental health and that kind of thing, like it's very hit or miss with a lot of people, and I think in a stream side of things, like oftentimes I don't talk about it on stream. I'd rather talk about it off stream for people because I feel like then you don't have that audience there for them to maybe feel nervous or want to necessarily hold back on something that could be bothering them that they won't say, right? But I use the stream side of it to keep that positive attitude and remain positive as that alternative of it. If that maybe that I don't need to talk to that person, that person just being there and including them in something that might just make a little bit of their day a little bit better or whatever it may be, right? Can kind of change that perspective for them
Yeah.
and help them with that, right? Especially whatever they're going through, right?
Yeah, it's like you're not going to go on to stream and you're not going to be talking about these kinds of things. You aren't like, I'm not going to start my next stream and then just start asking people the questions that I put on here, but you're
True.
fostering but you are fostering an environment that indicates that you're a person who's in tune with this, that can allow people a safe space in a
Yeah,
way
yeah.
that's not intimidating them by getting bogged down in the whatever of it.
Actually, that's it's a good way to put the transition into that too, because it's funny that you mentioned that kind of thing because I always have seen myself as very lighthearted and very approachable kind of person, but that apparently doesn't seem to be the case all the time because apparently people seem to be fairly intimidated by me, and I don't know what it is. Maybe I like I articulate myself very well, I think in some cases, or at least I hope I do, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is, but then, the few people that sometimes I have talked to, they're always like, oh yeah, like if you message me or something like that, it's like, I'm afraid. And I'm like, why are you afraid? Like, what are you worried? What have you done that makes you worry that if I'm messaging you, something's going wrong? Right. But,
Well, I think that's almost like well, okay, this is from my perspective and my bias being the fact that the only contact that I have from you is via Twitch, via the community Discord, and via our now DMs. I think it might be from an executive side of things where I think like the last time that you and me were in a Discord call with a few other people, somebody made a joke and they were like somebody was like, I'm really like nervous and afraid to like DM Babs on Discord about something because she is like the judge, jury, and executioner. So I think it's like I almost wonder if it's like if it's an approachable thing or if it's just because like from an executive point of view, they're like it's like you don't want your boss necessarily calling you in and you're like, oh, did I do something wrong?
oh my, actually, that's so true in that sense too. You don't really think about it until you get the other perspective from that, but you're not wrong with that too. And especially with like the community Discord, if you've probably seen a few times, like it's not that I truly separate myself from when I talk with people, but I do take certain things a lot more serious than others, right? Especially with a Discord of that size and value to me,
Yeah.
because I've made it my home too, right? And like, listen, it would be no different than like if somebody left dog shit on my front porch, right? If you're gonna do that, you're gonna have the fury. It's just like I'm
Yeah,
easy
exactly.
going until you piss me off. Then it's like, good luck. That's it, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. And I see like that totally makes sense, but I also see from your perspective where that's coming from where you're like you're a lighthearted person, you're easy to talk to in my estimation, but that's also because I feel like I at this point given where I'm at in my quote unquote podcast career, I feel like I could talk to anybody regardless cuz as shallow as it sounds, I base a lot of my ability to talk to somebody off of the size of that person because I'm like because I operate in such a small circle that like it's not like I have a bunch of I don't have like any actual hangups with what I've been doing for this podcast, but sometimes it's like I don't want people to have the impression that I'm talking to people who are bigger than me to try and get attraction because one, it's not working, right? Because the people that I talk to, they don't operate in the podcast space. So I don't expect those people to come and listen to a podcast, but I'm like, they like this person. I like this person. I want to talk to them. But I'm like, I hope people don't think that I'm trying to like mooch off of this person having X amount of followers on Twitch or whatever. It's just like you do something that I'm into. I consume your content and I like your content. I want to talk to you.
yeah,
But
well,
like
the confidence that you have with it too. That's what's pulled you into it more, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can see where you could come from that side with it too. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that you go down that route, right? Like you said, right? You're passionate about what you do, and actually taking those big strides to feel like it's no like even with Twitch, I still do the same thing to this day. I don't consider myself a big streamer, man. I've never considered myself a big streamer, and like when I met Something Stupid, which is a great example, and Maple and Babs and Light and Love all talked about this with the first time that they rated to me that they almost I don't want to say idolize because then I'm going to be inflating my own ego, but they came off with that idea that they idolize the way that I handle things, right? And like the person that I was and how I did my stream stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny how it puts that perspective in mind because I like well, talking about the whole gender thing too, right? Like I don't like to see roles in that kind of sense. I see people for who they are, right? I don't think anybody is bigger or better than any person in this world. There's no amount of money or amount of respect or anything else that can throw at me that could potentially say that like I should see this person in a different light. I think that we're all equally the same. We're mind, body, and soul. That's not going to change that we're all people, right? And it blows me away because if you see obviously how well like an example like Maple's doing and stuff like that, right? I'm a small streamer compared to her. It feels like at this point she's pushing for partner and all this other stuff. And like, honestly, I'm so proud of her in that kind of sense too, because like she works so hard for what she does and she deserves every bit of it. Right. And, seeing myself being part of this group feels bigger than anything in my own sense that I've ever done. Like I have my own self accomplishment. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, downsizing that kind of to it. Right. But, like the people that I've met, especially some of what I viewed even in my own eyes of larger streamers too, like that was always my thought too, was like, I don't want people to think that like I'm doing this for my own views. I'm just interested in this person, what their content is, what's there. And I'd love to be a part of it. It's no different than me reaching out to you with that case. Right. I've seen everybody else doing it. I was interested in it. That's why I was like, fuck yeah, put me on the podcast. I want to be here to be enjoyable. Put me on the
podcast, right? Or else.
Well, we didn't come in that case, but no, it's not like I have your family or anything.
Yeah, no, but it's almost like the opposite thing where like I satirically, I'm just like, come on the podcast or else, I swear to God. But no, I guess the whole point that I was trying to get across earlier is that like from your perspective, I can see how you would maybe think like, because for you, you're like, I don't think I'm hard to approach, but then I've seen like the messages that you post and it's like, you're not like serious, but you're just like the best example that I can think of is the amount of times that you've been like, hey, people are going to probably try and DM you on Twitter and they're going to try and scam you. Like, don't fall for that. Yeah. like you do post very like down to earth, like things that are just to get the information across, get the point across, keep people safe. But I can also understand how to some degree, some people could look at that. And if that's their only contact they have, or the only message they've seen from you, they're like, whoa.
oh yeah. Well, and being when I first started with the court, i.e. good example with that too, is that I was very active in it, and it's grown exponentially in the last couple months where things have changed. But as of the start of this year, I've been on a couple of my own personal journeys to clean up and do things that I've been slacking on for years. I.e. an example, which because people who can't see it, my camera's on right now, my green screen's gone. You can't see anything, but I have boxes in this room, right, that I have never unpacked, and like that's been a good thing. Again, for my own mental health's sake, I've finally come to terms to say that like I'm tired of seeing these boxes. It's time to clear it out and either get rid of stuff. Or keep like the small things away from me so that I can finally feel like, I'm just not living in a house full of boxes kind of thing. Right. And it seems small, but that small thing makes the biggest difference for me. So like this year, I've like honestly been on a huge journey to clean up things that I've been slacking on for so many times, getting rid of stuff that I no longer need. When you pick up like small hobbies, I'm sure with a lot of people who know when it comes to like those ADHD, like hobby hopping, like both Patty and I do that all the time. Right. And I've gotten to a point where I don't do it as much, or I don't do it at all at this point. And now I got to get rid of all those old ones. Right. But like, I want to create those new memories, or even if I do pick up those new hobbies, I can feel like I can do it where I'm not living in that small stuff. Right.
Yeah.
That's made a big difference to that. But it's really pulled me away from the Discord. And honestly, I was really heavy into the Discord and I wanted to get to know a lot of people. And I think we've had a lot of new people that have come in and haven't been able to see or experience that softer side, let's call it, of me, right? Because they see me more as the big bad moderator. And I laugh with this about Weave and Love because they gave me the meme master role and purposely put me above the team and everything. So everybody like sees that red name at the top of the roles, right? And they think, oh shit, this guy's gonna end me if I do something wrong. And it's like, no, like if you're doing something wrong in the first place, it doesn't even matter if it's me. It's going to be somebody who's going to figure it out. But like at the end of the day, I try and chat with people as much as I can. And actually, I think we'll probably see more improvement here in the future because I find myself wanting to spend more time into it again and actually trying to get to know more of these people. So I think hopefully that might, change some views on it. Like you said, right? They're no longer looking at that executive position of like Spooky, this guy who's like telling everybody to stop being stupid and clicking links from some random person who just joined the Discord for the first time, right? So
yeah, I'll admit there was a couple of those that I see and I'm like, this person's never posted a message in the Discord. They're only like, why would they be messaging out to you directly? Like you're being a little bit silly and goofy. I respect the fact that they're like coming into the community Discord where that person came from and they're like, hey, just letting you guys know. But sometimes I'm like, you seem a little hesitant to click on the link when it's like, you should know not to do that in the first place.
Yeah. Like that's like simple, like, not cybersecurity, but that's just like online almost safety. Like, Yeah, online safety. That's actually, it's no different than, your grandma accidentally like clicking that like email that's like, oh, we have your input your credit card information or your account's gonna get closed. Or you're gonna owe like $3,000. Like it's the same
Yeah.
stuff, and you don't realize that. I think it's that people don't get taught that stuff, right? Because I think Discord, when it came out too, it was a great place. That stuff didn't happen, but it happens all the time now, and it's like, just use the sense of like, do I know this person? Why is this person messaging me just a link, right? Like it just, be skeptical and that kind of stuff, right? And it's
Yeah.
just for your own safety with that. As somebody who has had their stuff hacked in the past, it's a scary experience when it happens. And like, it only takes once for you to realize, to be like, no, I'm never letting this happen
I am
again,
never
right?
fucking around with that again. Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
totally
I'm
reasonable.
I'm two-step authing everything I own at this point. So,
Yeah.
oh god.
But yeah, actually, I guess a small side tangent before I can get back to my big tangent is I love getting text message scams because all of them are like, your America First credit union account is about to be locked, and I'm like, you fucking idiots! I don't use America First.
Dude, I get those too. Okay, because you're gonna go on your big tangent, I won't make it crazy. But yeah, same thing. Patty and I were planning on doing a cruise. We ended up canceling it. It's not really a crazy story or anything. We decided to pay off bills instead. But
Fair enough.
I signed up for that cruise, and the only way to do it was in the States. So they took my number. The moment that we gave them number, I have gotten so many text messages and calls from numbers in the States being like, the same thing. Your American Express card has been taken, or like this and that. And it's like, dude, I don't even live in America. Like, I don't have these things. Like,
That's funny.
God.
But no, so I guess so. What I'm realizing is the way that I formatted these questions is actually kind of in tandem with my own experience in relation to them. So the reason that I used the word interesting when I asked about like, what did you find so interesting about mental health that you decided to go out of your way to do all this other stuff, I use the word interesting because I think I found it first interesting when I was 13, and my girlfriend at the time took me to a therapy session with her. I don't know how, we were never that close, so I don't really know how that happened, right?
That's an interesting experience to start with.
Yeah, it's like a weird first date, but okay. No, but no, her and her mom took me to a therapy session with them because her dad is the way that he is, and for some reason I had to, as a 13-year-old, and I don't know how I knew this, I had to explain the deleterious effects of alcohol on the brain to both her and her mom
Oh,
in front of the
that's
therapist, and I was like, how did this happen?
yeah, really.
Yeah, it wasn't even like it wasn't a bad experience. It wasn't like one that really shook me to my core, shivered me timbers or anything. It was just like one that happened and I was like, why? I was like, why is this my responsibility?
Yeah.
But
From this,
but like after that and then having talks with her, having to go through multiple having to actually go through multiple hard talks with her that were outside of a therapy session, I was like mental health is such a crazy thing. I want to be a therapist. Not
you
anymore.
developed the you became fascinated with the psychology behind it. I think
Yeah, and so that's
you
why
might be on.
I took psychology in high school as a junior, and then I took AP psychology as a senior in high school. And I even bought you can't see it on account of this is internet radio listeners. I have a goddamn book back there that is basically just how to analyze and like pseudo treat like any mental disorder under the sun. And it is like, I mean, it is literally probably as thick as a Bible.
Oh,
And
those pages are huge, man.
yeah. And so like Christmas of like 2018, I want to say, my parents were like, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I kind of said like standard things that would be typical of a 17-year-old. And then I was like, "Can you give me this $30 book off of Amazon?" And they're like, "You want a fucking manual for Christmas?" I was like, "Yes." And I never actually read it, but then I like gave it to one of my coworkers to have her read it for a few days at work, and she was pretty fascinated by it. So it's like that whole experience made me realize like how interesting of a concept mental health is, but not just
Yeah.
mental health, but I guess the psychology of a person, the way that they
Uh,
grew up, and a bunch of other stuff. So that was why I used the word interesting.
Yeah, well, no, like you're on the right track with it too, right? Because I think you're right. Things become interesting because we're naturally curious as people, right? So I think what we find fascinating or interesting, or what we become curious about, is what ultimately drives us to figure out more about it, right? And in a sense, I was through the same thing because I took psychology, sociology in high school, and I'll be honest with you, I almost failed the class because my teacher hated me. But I'm not going to talk about that. That's different. He was just a dick.
That's for a
But
different
I
episode.
like it's weird to describe, but I don't think I've ever learned more in a class than in that class. And somehow he just didn't fail me, but gave me a 50 just to be like, just get out of here and don't come back, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
through my whole experience with that, and the understanding of the human mind and how like I guess like the brain just works, right? And
Yeah.
really what justifies people to do the things that they do, right? And it's weird because like I think because I've been so open with it over the years, I've also kind of desensitized myself to other things, right? Patty and I have a joke like years ago because like there was a couple experiences, a couple things that like an example going back to that. Let's call it toxic masculinity, but not necessarily. Actually, my cousin and I are extremely close. He's one of the people who actually got me back into streaming. But when his brother passed away, so my cousin, I didn't cry during the wedding or anything else like that. And it's weird. And I say weird in a very light sense because I just I'm the kind of person I don't really cry. I'll cry to like a Disney movie. I won't really cry to it, but like like you get like watery eyed. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you kind
Kind
of
of thing.
feel that tightness.
Yeah, like you feel it, it's there, right? It puts you in an emotional state, kind of thing, right? And one of the things that I've realized in myself, and I think what's part of the reason why I became so passionate and fascinated about it, is the learning about coping mechanisms, right?
Ah, yes.
Things that we do to cope with traumatic events, certain things in our lives that maybe make us feel uncomfortable, that kind of thing, right? And I didn't cry during his wedding, but during my entire time that I was there, I tried to do my best to stay relatively neutral, but also kind of make people laugh a little bit about it, and see it more as the celebration of life than a funeral. I've always hated funerals for that reason because I always just feel so sad and depressing, right?
Yeah.
If I always said if I ever died or if I know I'm gonna die, like give me a celebration of life. I don't want people to cry. I want people to be like, damn, like we had a good run at it. Let's I'll see you in the next one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
I'll
I'm
see you in the next
lighthearted
one.
with that.
YouTube
Yeah.
outro plays.
Yeah, exactly. Throw in Mr. Beast fucking outro, or what his name is, Andrew Tate outro here. You know what I mean? Like it's very much like, but that moment actually, and this happened a few years before we moved out to where we were, and I had a weird kind of moment where it's not that I snapped or anything, but like I had this idea in my head. I'm like, maybe I'm what are those people that basically like don't feel like any emotions to other people? What are they
Sociopaths.
called? Thank you. Yes, I was like, am I a sociopath? Like I put the idea in my
You're
head
like, oh
that
no.
I'm like, shit, do I not feel things like this and that, right? And I was like, no, because at the end of the day, when I further analyzed it in myself and see that's where I become passionate about it again, right? Because I become fascinated in my own ways of how I deal with things. And instead of just being like, this is how I dealt with something, I'm like, why did I deal with that way, right? And I find that like definitely in sad scenarios or depressing scenarios, and again, part of the reason why I pull things, an example like my stream, off of so much positivity is I think how I cope with a lot of things is I like to make people smile, or like try and bring that positivity back into that situation,
Brighten up the room.
as a way for me to cope with that kind of stuff, right? Or maybe instead of seeing it as this is what happened, and trying to just be there for them, seeing what I can do to ultimately fix it, which has both been a burden with some scenarios that I've dealt with, but also at the same time has helped me through those things, because that's definitely, there's a time and a place for that kind of stuff, right? It doesn't work in every scenario, right? But
Yes.
I think that's where as a person, I take more the positive side of things. When I still reflect on that to this day, and I think about when he passed away, and I guess a little more personal with it, I was there. In a long story short, because it's going to be a little depressing in that kind of sense, but he basically went brain dead because of what happened to him, unfortunately, and they still had him on life support. And I saw him in the hospital when he was on life support, and definitely seeing him in that state after growing up with him and spending most of our lives together definitely was something that I don't know if I've still processed to this day, or if I just was something that became clear to me in the moment right off the bat, that I didn't see it as a negative thing kind of scenario, right? But it's I guess the way that, because I promote things and because now I started rambling, I forgot where I was going to end that off with. But
Shit.
because I do that all the time. But
Welcome to the
it's
podcast.
it's exactly right. It's what helped me get to where I need to be, right, and that positive side, that maybe that's the way that I cope with things, right. So that's again where that passion comes into, because it's like, if this is how I handle things, I wonder how many other people handle it this way, right, and or what they use for their coping mechanisms, kind of thing. But that psychology and the whole premise behind it, and how the human brain works and how it functions and handles those kind of things, and how it affects other parts in your life, is what really got me on that journey to learn more about it and how I can use it in my life to better my own, but also maybe have that chance again to help other people, right. So it's when you become passionate about it, yeah, it's just, you feel like you can go on it for like hours, right. So,
Yeah. Unfortunately, this podcast has a time limit of, I don't know what it is yet. I would probably give it 2 hours, but I'm not taking up 2 hours of anyone's time. Anywho,
we'll see.
No, the interesting thing about that whole thing is the fact that like there's nothing inherently wrong with your way of being able to help other people cope with a hard situation, because then people know, like, if I want to be able to laugh a situation off, or just use comedy as a means of kind of filling up more space in your head, so you don't have to bog it all down with whatever happened, they can come to you for that.
Yeah.
But as a person who also is like emotionally, well, I feel like I'm emotionally intelligent, kind of. But if somebody came to me in a fit of tears, I wouldn't know how to help them, because I'm like stupid, because I want to try and fix the problem. But I recognize that not everybody wants to have their problem immediately fixed. And there was an interesting post that I saw that was just like, do you want to listen to them? Do you want to fix them? Do you want to distract them? Or I guess it's, do they want to be distracted? Do they want to be helped? Do they want to be listened to?
I would say you almost have, I think very similar to how I process things when it comes to that kind of thing too, is that where you see it in a logical sense. As much as it is an emotional standpoint from it, you see it as logically as, here's the problem, here's how I can fix it, instead of sometimes where, yeah, like you said, right? Like, is it something that I can fix, or do I just need to listen to them, or do I help distract them kind of with it, right? So
Yeah.
there's actually pretty 3 good tiers to how, let's say, most negative situations usually pan out, right?
Yeah, how people want to, what people want when they're in a time of distress, essentially.
Yeah.
So, and I can recognize that sometimes being the logical, I also have this problem where if if I try and help somebody with a problem, but I can't, I try and give them as many other options as possible to help at least remedy the situation or lessen the blow or something or other. There's like a bunch of
suggestions.
I apply that philosophy when I'm at work for a bunch of miscellaneous things that no one gives a shit about, because it's about shipping, right? But that also means that if somebody wants help with something and I only know how to help fix the problem, and I don't know how to fix the problem, I kind of just feel useless. And then I literally just sit there in silence and just kind of look at them, and kind of like look at like miscellaneous things around the room to just try and distract myself while I'm just letting them do their thing. And I'm like, well, this is like maybe helping.
Just being there, yeah, maybe. I've been in a few of those too. It puts you in a rock and a hard place, right? But ultimately, maybe at that time and place, like you might not have been the person that could truly help them in that way too. I think that sometimes, and the reason why I think I further understand why my method doesn't work, because it's obvious, right? It doesn't work in all cases. It's coming to accept the fact that it's not always going to work, right? And there's nothing you can change about that kind of thing too, right?
Yeah.
You can't see it as a failure. It's just more, again, we tried, it failed. You can always try again, or try and do the next step to further assist them, right? And you're right. I think as a logical thinker, is the first thing that we think of is, oh well, this is breaking, let me fix it for you, right? But sometimes you got to put the tools in somebody else's hand for them to fix that too, right? So,
yeah, exactly. Like you said, so you didn't fail, you just weren't the right person. What's the thing? It's like, you could be the best peach in the tree, but if no one likes peaches, they're not going to come to you.
Oh, exactly.
Some weird cliche. I found that quote from like a weird ass, from like a voice acting practice duet thing on TikTok that was like, do this and try and be an emotional support help person. And I was like, no one fucking wonder I can't voice act. I can't be sentimental for shit.
Actually, I've wanted, it's funny that you've talked about that with the voice acting thing, which, by the way, I do actually very enjoy your voice. I think you very much have that podcast style, a radio voice. I think you should try and pursue it as much as you can. Don't give up for something like that.
Oh yeah, no, I'm
I've
not actually giving up. I just have to find the right place to apply myself because because the biggest part of being able to be a voice actor is like having the range to do a bunch of other stuff. So
Yeah.
I think I need to start by finding something more akin to how I already talk and what I already do to get
And what you're
myself
good
into the
at.
rhythm of how to read how to read something, how to like I do bits all the time where I am a different character, but they're not like too far off from who I am. It's mostly just how I something or other. So if I can find something
Hmm.
like that to get myself in the door, I can do that, and then I can just kind of go from there. So luckily,
Yeah.
I'm not doubting myself if that's what you thought I was doing.
No. I mean, like, commit to it, right? Like, give it a shot. Like, the worst thing, like, what are people going to do? Judge you? Like, fuck them. Like,
Yeah.
like, I've talked about that a few times too, because as much as I'm so hypocritical by me saying this, because I already talked about the fact that I hate the sound of my own voice, but I've always loved the idea of thinking of becoming a voice actor too. And, I think it's because well, if you've actually seen a lot of cases, I talk to myself a lot, and I do that everywhere and anywhere. And it's just a habit that I think I do as I process throughout my day, right? And those little voices that occasionally like pull up with it, like if you've ever heard me do like the 60-year-old smoker voice, if you ever heard me do that before, and it's one of those ones that's just stuck with me, and I think I got better and better at it because I kept doing it all the time,
Yeah.
and I enjoy it. And ironically, I learned it from a lady at a or I don't know if it was a lady. I should just say them, because that's probably the better way to do it. I don't know that person. For all I know, they could be transitioning, whatever it is, right? Please don't judge me. But it sounded like a 65-year-old smoker straight out of New Jersey over the microphone. Can I get you water today, sweetheart? Like, it was just that voice stuck in my brain, and I've been practicing ever since. And that's what did it to me, right? But what I think, once you find those voices too, just like practice it, right? Practice it and try it out and test it, right? Like when I did cowboy, like when we did some of the sheriff spooky shit, right? Which I love, which no spoiler, but somewhat spoiler. I'm coming back to doing some more cowboy related themes because I fucking love cowboy aesthetic. I would just dick around and do like the best Southern accent I could think of doing, right? And the result of it actually pulled out some really great content for shit and had people like laughing over it, right? Which was like, I didn't even expect people to do it, but now I go back and rewatch it and I laugh at myself, right? So I think, taking those opportunities to jump on it, it's good. But I know voice acting in its sense, it's a professional field too, right? Incredibly competitive. But I think, if you set your mind to it and you figure out what works for you, you can definitely get deeper into it for sure.
Yeah.
The
Speaking
potential's
of
always
taking an
there,
accent
man.
and practicing it, taking an accent and practicing it, 60 to 70% of my genealogy comes from northwest England or somewhere in that area, right? And so I think that helps me do this. I think I have a more convincing British accent than a lot of people who do a British accent. One, because of that. Two, because I practice it by accident, because when I whisper, I talk in a British accent. And if you listened to the episode I did with Chikara, I talk in a British accent in my sleep. I don't do a ton
Oh.
of sleep talking, but like if I'm in a dream where I need to talk to somebody, I might incidentally end up actually talking in my sleep. And I talk
Hmm.
in a British accent, and it is the most bizarre thing ever. And so I think I could maybe get away with doing that.
Yeah.
But
Jump
on
on
top
it.
of that, I also have like stream redeems for British/Australian, since they kind of intermingle.
Don't
Southern,
tell Weeb that.
my accent intermingles is what I should say. Weeb, don't come for me, you piece of shit. No, I've got British/Australian because my accent tends to mingle. I have Scottish, I have Southern, and I have Pirate. And then some sadistic bastards in my chat will do Scottish and no cursing, meaning that I will
No.
probably lose $15 in a stream. So yeah,
No.
it's believable. It's possible.
Yeah.
But
Well, you get that rage at some point though with it too, right? But
yeah,
no, like it's a good start for it too, right? I think people uniquely have a lot of their. I think it's you got to find what works with your voice too. I've chatted with a few people that I know that do voice acting, and nothing crazy. Like I don't know any super popular people, right? But people who've done like YouTube videos, or they just did it for a friend and stuff like that, right? I think it's like method acting and that kind of stuff. It's a good way to do it. You want to like almost develop what character you want to project in that voice, right?
Oh,
And
yeah. Don't be you in
yeah,
an X accent. Be a person with that accent. Like,
yeah,
be
you know,
another
like
person.
even like do things in your normal life how you feel that person would do. I know it sounds so weird and like goofy, but like that creative what is it? Oh, damn, what's the word for that? Process, the creative like
Oh,
process
yeah.
to it. That's like what helps you kind of like build that too, right? I've again, if you can tell, when I become, it was another thing that I really enjoyed looking into and researching and doing that kind of thing. When I really get hyper focused on stuff, I'm in there deep, man. I'm 3 a.m. watching like old school 2006 YouTube videos with that same old music about like Xbox 360s they were planning in like this year. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just the most random conspiracy theory stuff just to get a tints of like information from it, right? But,
Yeah. But no, the principle of it makes sense, because if you're voice acting, you're effectively becoming a different character than yourself. Being a character other than yourself is what gives you the range. And so if you basically build a character that ties in with an accent that's different from yourself, that's how you get better at being that accent. And that's also how you get better at being able to be naturally in that accent. Because if you're recording for something, you say, all right, I'm going to be James from New South Wales or whatever the fuck it is. But,
yeah.
that's whatever.
Yeah.
Um, man, we're gonna just try and hard gun for these two. Let's see how these go. Um, why do you think there are a lot of people who focus really heavily on being in a bad mental state? Like, this sounds like,
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's good.
or like advocating
Um,
for a bad mental state, I guess, because you mentioned it earlier.
yeah. Well, I guess it's good to kind of alliterate. I don't know what the word I want to think of it,
Elaborate.
but elaborate on it a little bit more. Yeah. See, this is where like these like that kind of thing. This like these topics. Like, look, I gotta get the words out before I actually produce what I want to say. No, like that's the side of it. Like when we were talking about it, where you almost get into like the political side of it, right?
Yeah.
Like in my personal opinion, and again, where this kind of stems from is where my own experiences are. So obviously, for anybody who's listening or like yourself, right, take it with a grain of salt. But from at least where I see that side of it come into is people who use it for their advantage, for whether it be social media presence or like they want to almost feel like they want to impress people in their lives by having it, or like something for it's I don't want to say it's victimization, but I guess that would be the word for it, right? Where they use it to they make it their identity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like
I
playing the
talk
game of suffering.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like it's not the case for everybody, right? But it's very often what I've seen, and I've had experiences with people that I've personally known where they jump on that bandwagon in that kind of sense to get that symphony, wow, sympathy, or that pity, you know what I mean, that
Yeah.
they want to get from people, because that's where it brings them that self-satisfaction where it's like, oh, you pity me, so like that's what makes them happy. And it's a toxic, very bad, like it's a toxic trait to have in that kind of thing, instead of like, let's say, what are my actual issues that I'm having with this, and why am I doing this to get this, whether if it's attention or whatever it may be that you're doing for it, right? If it's coping mechanism, wherever the standpoint is, instead of ultimately doing things in your life to potentially fix that problem or help yourself through it, right? And you see it a lot. Like TikTok's a great example, right? Like I don't know if you've occasionally I get stuff like that comes up on my For You page where people get called out for it, saying they have like things like Tourette's syndrome. I don't know if you ever saw that like phase of people that were like acting like they had Tourette's, and it's an awful thing to think that like people see that as a way that, oh, more people will watch my videos because of this, or it'll bring me more attention because of this, because I don't know what it is in their minds. And I don't want to say like sound insensitive by saying this, but that's how you always know it's going to be insensitive when somebody says that. But like
He's like, not to be
it's
a dickhead, however.
not to be a dick, but right, but it's it's wrong in my eyes, right? I don't think that that's an appropriate way to do it. And it's something like where we draw our own lines for our moral values and stuff like that for people. And because of my experience that I've had that I see do that, is where for me, it's the kind of stuff that I personally stay away from, because those type of toxic traits can leave you down a very dark path, right? And I think that, I don't know if maybe that's what it is, because of the world that we live in, of some that validation, that quick validation that people want from going viral, or like because of the way that they identify themselves as, oh, I'm this person, I have this, instead of saying, hi, my name is this person, right? And then getting to know you as who you are, and not what your conditions are, right?
Yeah.
Or what's affecting you, and that kind of thing, because they're not personality traits in that kind of sense, right? I can understand, and like I said, it's not a way of me attacking these kind of people for that kind of thing. It's for the people who use that to their advantage, that ultimately you could say that I am attacking. For the people that actually suffer with it, it's hurting them at the end of the day,
Yeah.
right? And you can see it very blatantly in a lot of people who do bring light to certain conditions, or things that they have in their lives, that they don't advocate it as like, look at me, this is my problem, this is why you want to watch me. They're doing things that they enjoy, and they want to spread the awareness of people who are actually affected by these issues, and they don't glorify it, right? Where I feel like that toxic side glorifies those things, right? So that's, for me, that's where like things tend to get a little bit more trickier with me, because I'll be honest, I have purged a lot of negativity out of my life, and that was one of those things that I purged. I had some of those people in my life that would use things like severe depression, and very dramatic or drastic conditions, to not only use it to their advantage, but ultimately isolate themselves, which was just the result of what they chose to do, right?
Yeah.
But well, especially for me, and it's because of the fact that I have personally suffered through those relationships, and how they used it to bring my own mental health down in that sense. Oh God, I lost it again, dude. I keep doing this. I had to separate myself from it, because, like I said, I wanted to be on the up and up. I wanted to bring the positive side of my life. We were just in different paths of our lives in that sense. We met at that crossroads, and sure, maybe they were in my life for that period of time, kind of thing. But ultimately, I wanted to go in the direction to make myself better and make myself happy. And they wanted to run down that path that was just going to bring them down to that rock bottom, right? So, but yeah, I'm very, I wouldn't say I'm against it, because I do still support people who go through those actual issues and do have those problems, and I'm there for what I can do. But I can no longer put myself in a position where I feel like it's ultimately going to affect me, because that's where, unfortunately, you do have to cut those mentalities off, right? To better yourself. You got to surround yourself with people that are going kind of in that same path, because if you don't, it's very easy to stray off of it and back up in the same place you were, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've had exactly two people that I used to be friends with that I am no longer friends with, and if my other friend happens to listen to this, he's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. We had one guy who, when we met some new people and introduced him into the group, this guy was just not the most detestable person I've ever seen, but probably up there just in the way that he acts. He's just not a savory character the way he was acting.
Fair.
It wasn't great. And so as a result, all these new people that we brought in immediately did not like him. That then spawned like a year-long pseudo feud where these two groups, this group of people and this one guy did not like each other because he was a dickhead to them. And then eventually, the climax of this point was when he started drama at the expense of a person who has a lot of trauma and has a lot of family issues and a lot of mental health issues that she's working towards. But he started drama at her expense and then blamed it on us somehow. And then that just kind of made everything explode. And then eventually all of us got into a call for whatever reason, and he started making himself the victim and saying, "Oh, well, it's because I grew up in an abusive household and my parents have alcohol issues." And that was when he learned the harsh truth that a lot of us went through the same shit that he did, and we are not even a tenth of the bad person that he is. So from that point, we were like, okay, now you're trying to make yourself the victim for a problem you started, and this has been like a 7-year-long thing that you've been doing. We've given you too many chances to fix yourself. You've proven you can't fix yourself. You're going down on this path by yourself. You've pissed off every single last person that was in a part of this group. You have no one to blame but yourself. And now he's gone. And now everybody's lives are infinitely better as a direct result. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Maybe on a smaller scale because it's one guy.
Yeah. Well, it's a good example though, right? Like
Yeah.
and I think it's sometimes people have to, you have to do that kind of stuff, right? It's literally, it's not a nice thing to do. Don't get me wrong, right? But like, in order for some people to see the reality of what their actions are, that they're going to have repercussions, and whether if you're the person that happens to be that one to give them the bad news, or separate yourself, and in order for them to realize it, at the end of the day you can see it as a win, right? Because
Yeah.
maybe that will be the change to them that changed them. But like an example, like in your story, he used that side of him to make that his personality, and then ultimately used it to create a toxic situation with that kind of thing, right? Which is why, yeah, again, the same reason why I don't deal with those people. I fucking hate drama, man. I don't like that kind of shit. If I can sit in my backyard with a nice cold beer in my hand, sun beating down on my face, dog having a good old time, I'm okay with
I'm
that. I'm
chilling.
okay with living drama. I keep a lot of my personal circles very close to heart. And I have had a lot of people in time, like I said. So coming to that actual social side, like when I was talking about, how the internet has become more of my tribe in that kind of sense, is that growing up, I was incredibly social. I went to a lot of parties. I went and saw a lot of people. Obviously, drugs and alcohol, I don't condone, but you know what? Sometimes that's kind of the nature of that kind of stuff, right? The party life, sure, it has its ups and downs, but let me tell you, the highs are high and the lows are very low. But
Yeah.
you meet a lot of interesting people along the way, but you also meet a lot of people that are going to be no benefit to you in your life. And it's not a matter of seeing them as a benefit or not. It's just a matter of seeing it as, is this the kind of person that I want to be around? Right. And when you pull that toxic side into it, it's bad. So I shrunk down a lot of my groups with that, because I realized people that I really considered my friends, which was really more to me. It's very much the I'm not mad, I'm disappointed kind of
Yeah,
scenario.
it happens.
It really made me see the true side of who they were, and it really did shorten my group. And I found, actually, and I think ironically enough, coming back to the age thing, for how old I am, because really I'm not that old anyways, but I find I relate a lot more to the people that tend to be younger than me. And I'm not directly saying that, because there's people that are way older than me that I also do get a hell of, along with super well, right? um but I think maybe because of my experiences, that I've been able to relate to them in a better sense, and I've kept up with so much more trends and things that are going on, because it's things that I enjoy, that's where I think I relate to them more, right? And it feels like there's almost a more real side to a lot of those people that I've met because of that, right? Like Nick, who I consider to be my best friend. We stream a lot, like we work together. I met him like only like 6 or 7 years ago, where we worked together, and like I honestly, him and I are like clockwork. Like the two of us, we have like we laugh at the same shit. We play the same games together. Our dynamic is like there. And I've always loved that. Like we're also very different people, right? But that kind of thing, I think that it was less of, for that kind of thing, for me to realize that it wasn't it wasn't the quantity of people that I wanted. It was the quality of people I wanted, right? And also that we shared those same ideals, that positivity in life, that wanting to go down that direction, instead of being, in that group of people that were always going to be like, oh yeah, man, my depression's down. And I could be like, oh yeah, man, I'm feeling really down today too. Like, life sucks, this and that. Right. Like I wanted people to be there to also like, be like, nah, man, like, you know what? Like, let's see what we can do to make your day better. Right. You want to play a game with me today? Or like, do you want to just go chill? Maybe you should go take a nap, like that's what I wanted in that kind of sense. And I think when my mentality changed, instead of seeing as identifying myself as I have all these problems, right. Even in my own sense, it was more of like, you know what? Shit, you're right. I took that logical approach and said, why am I thinking about it this way? Right. Why, like, I want to achieve this happiness. And by doing that and hanging out with those people, I was not achieving that. Right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, especially with the amount of people that I knew, it was like, yeah, there was a lot of you fuckers that I do not want to see again.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, it's interesting to come back into that aspect though too, right? Because I've met a lot of people through streaming, but I think I've met a lot of genuine people in this part, right? Like I can even say like yourself, right? Like, we haven't chatted a whole lot when it comes down to a lot of this stuff. Like, we've had our occasional chats. You've seen me on stream. I've seen you on stream, that kind of thing, right? But it's easy to read genuine people. And I think that's something that I've also developed over time, and I recognize. So it's like, I like talking to those people. I like keeping those people close, man.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah. And
yeah.
I think within the next couple of years, that's when me and my general friends are also going to start going through that metamorphosis of recognizing like there are people who are in my groups who are not good for me. I think I've already kind of hit that point because really there's like hangups I have with some things, but it's not like such a big deal. Like it's things that I'm willing to work out to try and help figure out.
Yeah.
But yeah, ultimately we're going through that phase of trying to get all of that stuff kind of
Yeah.
slowly worked out. And then when I'm 30 and still doing this podcast, probably we'll see how that goes for me.
Yeah,
Damn,
God,
8 years? That's insane. Wow.
yeah.
But
It's wild stuff. No, but it's good actually you say that too, where it's probably a good thing to mention with that because obviously with a lot of the things that I've been saying, it's been very cut and dry to that kind of thing. But you are right. There are some gray areas in that too, right? You don't get hung up on everything, right? Not everything is a toxic trait. Not everything is necessarily there. People could be working stuff out. And honestly, if you know that they're doing that kind of stuff, right? Don't get hung up on those small things, right? Help them work through those kind of things or talk it out, man. Communication is key. We're fucking humans. We're sitting here talking right now. Just
we're social
communicate your shit,
creatures.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our life, right? It's like, what are you afraid to talk about, right? Like, don't let people judge you. Don't feel judged, right? You are who you are. Accept it. Believe in it. Be confident, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, that's just a good way to go about it. I'm gonna reel things back and kind of just go for a lighthearted question to kind of end things off and start taking us back down. What are some of your go-to things for trying to get your spirits back up, or just kind of de-stress after you've had a particularly stressful day or week at work? Because I know, like a few months ago, I had a pretty stressful week at work because I was dealing with like three issues that could affect like the health of the accounts that we have, and I was having to take over for somebody else because they weren't there for a few days, and I had to take over for some other people, and whatever. And I had hair. I had like relatively long hair. Like the longest part of my hair probably hit like the top of my spine, right where it would connect with
Mm.
my neck.
Oh,
And
where
then
I
I
am
had
now.
one, not quite on the right track to that, but not quite. Um, but I had a really stressful week at work, and then I was like, you know what? I want to get a haircut, and that was what I did. And then suddenly I came back next week, and I was like, I'm chilling. Obviously, that doesn't work for everybody, but that's just like I'm just
Yeah.
curious, kind of what things are your go tos for that.
Yeah. You know what? I think I have different stages for this, to be honest with you.
Fair.
Ironically enough, it's gonna sound weird when I say this, but one of the general tools that I use for more a daily thing is my own form of self meditation. Now, I don't mean like literally sitting cross-legged on the floor, fingers in the air, like that level of meditation. But like things in that help me kind of de-stress and take a kind of a step back to look at the things that maybe happened to the day that were affecting me in that kind of way and separate it from it, right? Like one of the things actually that I've developed more and more over time, especially with a lot of like stress from working in a kitchen and a lot of other places like that, is when I come home, my home is my sanctuary.
Yeah.
Obviously, eh, with I have a partner, right? Patty and I have been together for 9 years now, so like that's quite a fucking long time. So we know each other pretty well to that kind of sense, right? And like we communicate with certain things when it comes down to it. I tend to be more I'll ego boost myself with this. I tend to be more of a rock in our kind of relationship with that kind of thing. I've always kind of been more of a rock. So I don't let a lot of things affect me in a drastic enough way that it's going to put me to that level. And if I do, that's where like coming home is the biggest thing, because I know when I come home, the first thing that the first kind of steps that I can think of for the daily side is like I kind of self meditate in my thought process. I've got my loving partner at home. I got a fucking big old chunky sausage roll of a dog waiting and excited to see me when I get back, right? Like I'm living good. I eat well every day. Like I think about all the little things in my life that maybe some people might take for granted, or I also even took for granted
During that
years
time.
ago, right?
Yeah.
But like now I see it as a plus, right? Like I could be in such a worse place, and I just kind of take that thought process and say, I'm thankful for what I have, right? And for who I am and where I've become. And that's usually the first process. Definitely if it's been a tougher day, video games, man. like I've been an avid gamer for years, years and years. Like, fuck, man, I have my old PlayStation kicking around on my desk, dude. I have my old Nintendo SP right now with Legend
Oh,
of Zelda in it.
hell yeah.
Like, I've had this bad boy for years.
Let's
and
go.
I've used video games as an escape in its own sense, but also, again, in that form of self-meditation. I find, because of the way my mind works, is that I tend to be very creative, and I like submersing myself in something that maybe separates me from my own life in that sense of escape, but also it's the clarity of delving yourself and becoming part of somebody else's story really kind of takes me away from thinking about all the bad shit that happened and processing myself into something else, right? And doing that. So video games has always been huge for that. I love story-based video games, and I think, like, I enjoy movies, but I find I like video games better. And I think the reason why I'm so critical with a lot of games that I play for that kind of stuff, especially story-based games, is because the more a company can really push me into that story, make me feel like I'm that character, if something traumatic happens, I want to fucking sit there and cry at my desk and enjoy that shit. You know what I mean? If something exciting happens, the man bought his first house and I've been grinding the shit out of that game for it, it makes me feel happy to know that happened, right?
Yeah.
So delving into something like that really helps me out with that. Ironically enough, streaming has been a huge portion of what has helped me through a lot of the issues that I went through with. And I think that's part of the reason why I've become such an advocate for it. When I think of coming home and streaming to everybody and knowing that people are there waiting to watch and chat with me, just brightens my day in that kind of sense. Because knowing, again, there's that self-satisfaction of thinking that, like, just me being there, being goofy, enjoying it, even if I don't have a good day, man. Like, some days we just chill out, we just enjoy it, we just kind of let things like smooth out together, right?
Yeah.
Do a little art stream or do something chill, right?
Just have a good time to talk with people who probably did have a good day.
Yeah. Ultimately, if I really have something that does deeply affect me, I do talk with my partner about it. We go through that process with it. Maybe we just, fucking get a blanket or a Snuggie, have a little fucking ice cream, get a little weird, watch a show together, whatever it is, right? We just, we process that together. And I just kind of, again, go through those other processes that help me deal with that kind of stuff, right? I think, it's all a matter of perspective, right? Life is always going to be a matter of perspective. And like I said, where that balance comes in, where you understand that, what, if you had a shitty day or you're going to have a shitty day, that maybe by the end of the day, something good will come up that'll change your mind about it. And you don't want to dig yourself in that hole. You want to know that, like, so maybe you'll make your own ladder. Maybe somebody will pull a ladder down to the, right? Like, it's keeping that glass, I think, almost half full, right? And seeing it always like that, no matter any situation you're in, that takes me out of that stress at the end of the day. And yeah, if you want me to be on a Joker side with it, now to clarify a little bit with it, I really do need to get tested again for my ADHD stuff, because I'm just working off the fact that I have ADHD from when I was younger. I forget things all the time. Cool story with it is, when you forget a lot of shit, and you especially forget about the shit that stress you out, you don't think about it, man. And your attitude changes pretty quick. But to kind of explain how that works for me, part of the reason why I have that is when I was very young, I actually had an accident. We're not going to get too depressed about it, because it's nothing depressing about it. It happened when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I barely remember it. But anyways, I had a head injury that ultimately affected my brain in a way that I have what the doctors describe it as short-term memory loss, but it's not short-term memory loss. It's I forget certain key points in a day, or I can lose track of time with certain things. But often, because I'm such a visual learner, I don't have an inner monologue. I don't think in numbers. I think in, places, people, visions of things like that. There's certain triggers that can bring those memories, those thoughts back to me, right? But because I often forget most of this stuff, unless if something really comes back up to remind me of it, I just forget, dude. I just forget and just relax it out, So,
Man, the insane thing about that is, like, on one hand, it's like, yeah, it sucks that it happened, and I'm sure there's probably times where it's probably, fucked up something. But it
Oh yeah.
reminds me of a meme that I saw that just goes, "Man with amnesia forgets he has amnesia, remembers everything."
Yeah, exactly. No, that is so true in its own way. It works, But again, that's specific to me, right? I think you will find what helps you get down to that, right?
Yeah, do not rely on Spooky's ability to just forget things
Just
to
forget
help
things.
you,
Yeah,
because
yeah. You got to find what works for you and hold on to that. And the one thing that I can say with that is channel that negative energy, or because I'm getting way too spiritual with that, but like channel those negative thoughts and everything else into not even something productive, but into something beautiful, right? Don't let it hold you, right? Turn it into something that you can feel proud of, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. You know what? That's the most spiritual and philosophical way to end things off. So that's where I'm going to cut it. It's not going to be a hard cut. That's conversation done, over. Um, I don't know what to say. I made it okay. My friend's been asking me when I was going to show up because we have a video recording. We're not time sensitive. It's just he's been asking me, and I've been letting him know what's going on. And I
Yeah.
said, he said, "Are you still recording?" He asked me this 10 minutes ago, and he said, "You still recording?" And I said, "Yes." I didn't think mental health was going to take this long, as like a joke, because we've been here for damn near 2 hours. But hopefully that gave plenty of information for people to chew on. So I want to thank you for coming on here, and for being ballsy enough to reach out and say, put me on your podcast, in the most friendly way possible. Because if I can think about it, there are exactly 3 other people who have done that. One of them is confirmed for a few weeks out, and I'm not gonna tell you. I'm not gonna spoil shit.
No, I'll probably listen to it.
Yeah, no, I meant for the other people. My bad.
Oh,
One
yeah,
person
fair
reached
enough.
out, and they're scheduled for a few weeks out, and one person just said, "I'm a Disney nerd," and I said, "Okay, that sounds cool. I'm fascinated to hear about that." And then they never reached out to me. So,
Listen, if you ever want me to come back, there's plenty of topics we can chew on.
yeah, honestly,
all
the
there.
more we talk, the more I'm sure things are going to come up. Like, I still have a ton of people on the back burner who I need to bring back eventually, but also this podcast isn't seasoned enough yet where I can just start bringing back old people yet. Because I also have a ton of people on, not a ton. How many people do I have? 1, 2, 3. Shit, I have 3. Okay, I have 3 people on the back burner for the future, and then I'll probably find some more along the way. Either way, no, this is a hell of a good conversation. It was very enlightening to see how you and I are not that different.
No,
Like, I don't know why I thought we were. I mean, that's why we kind of click, I think.
That's probably why it works, man. You know what? Oh shit! What's the phrase for that too? Right? Well, great minds think alike, right? But yeah, law of attraction, man. You pull it together. It just seems to happen. It just works.
Yeah, it just works. So yeah, it's been a very good time. Hopefully, other people enjoyed it, because I think it only took a slightly sad turn a handful of times. So we did pretty good. But I'm just going to kind of turn the tide to you so that you can just feel free to self-advertise yourself and wherever people can find you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure if you weren't listening by now, you probably actually should have turned your volume on the podcast, but I am Spookyshine. I stream on Twitch. I'm very consistent weekly. I working on my TikToks as well. I've got Twitter. You can all find it all. Spookyshine at the twitch.tv. Why do I feel like I struggled to put that out there? But I do a lot of stuff. I avidly promote in the Something Stupid Discord that you can find on just about anybody's stream, including myself, if you ask for it. I don't have a lot going on here in the future, but if you want to see some good vibes, some chill vibes, maybe a little weird, something sussy, come check it out.
Yeah. On a really quick side note to that, my you remember Peter? Like, not just because of when I was telling you about it, but because when he joined and you guys were talking about art for a little while, he, after one of the streams that I had done was over, me and him were in a Discord, and he was just like, "Damn, your streams are so much," because like he thinks I'm kind of a weirdo, but like in a good way. And he's like, "Your streams are so much more innocent compared to everybody else's." And I was like, "Yeah, no, you're right." There's a lot of inappropriate jokes that are made over there, and it was only when he said that I retroactively looked back and was like, "Damn, no fucking kidding."
Hey, it comes out of us sometimes. What can we say?
It just happens.
And no filter, man. That's what does it.
Yeah, no filter except for the new moderation thing that Twitch has, which is
oh yeah,
it's a little weird. It's not a bad change, I don't think. It's just weird.
That's definitely something for another day.
Yeah, we're not here to talk about Twitch right now. No. But yeah, if you want to see Spooky, I mean, the links are all in the description. I've done half of the hard work for you. Additionally, because this is now the third something, the third. How do I explain this? So he's like the third member of the Seven Deadly Sins, as I've unofficially dubbed them, and they have yet to take the name into heart. But like the fourth person who would be of like, no, I guess the fifth person who would be of like notable nature in that community. Regardless, because he's part of the Seven Deadly Sins, I'll also just put the links for everybody else that he like, is usually also hanging around just coincidentally in the description, so you can go do that. You might even find me in there if you're lucky, and I'll be, what will I be doing? I'll be making jokes at the expense of other people, and in Spooky's stream, I'll be spending 100 of my channel points to play the trumpet sound.
Sounds like a good time.
Yeah, but no, so that's where you can find him and all of his compatriots. And all of that. If you're wondering where I'm at for some reason, you can look up DJ Cereal Sauce on anything. DJ_cereal_sauce probably works. One word, it probably works. With spaces, it probably works. If you can't find me, I don't exist on there, except for if I do under a different name. But if I don't have DJ Cereal Sauce as the name, I probably don't actively use that platform. YouTube, Spotify, Twitch, Instagram, Apple Music. I'm part of my own team of people that I wouldn't really call a stream team, but we're like getting there, called Nothing Is Anything. We've got a YouTube channel, and there's going to be so many links in the bottom of the description. But
it's okay, go follow him. Do it, you schmucks.
Yeah. Could you imagine if I ended it right there? Could you imagine? That'd be crazy. No, but yeah, go look at all the links in the description, and yeah, you know what? Yeah, just do it, you schmucks.